The FNRad Snowboard Podcast is presented by Vans. Hey, listeners, welcome back to the fucking Rad Snowboard Podcast. I'm Eric Trolson, otherwise known as Shred Jesus. It's great to be back, and I'm so excited for Season 7. I've got trips planned to record snowboarding interviews that'll give you a glimpse into the good old days, plus some legitimate legends in the making talking about what it's like to be a pro snowboarder these days and everything in between. Can't even believe it's winter. I mean, not quite yet, but I've already had turns at Seymour. There's people riding chairlifts in Colorado right now. Tahoe got 3 feet of snow. And I got to see the premiere for the King Snow movie, and it rocks. It's already winning all sorts of awards. I saw it in Whistler. I saw it down here in Vancouver, and you can see it if you live in Calgary, Edmonton, Toronto, Montreal, or Tremblant. So go to King Snow Insta, follow the links, buy a ticket. You will not be disappointed. Also, I want to thank author Jeremy Evans for recording with me over Skype this summer about his new book, See You Tomorrow. The book's about the disappearance and life of Marco Siffredi, who was the first guy to do a top-to-bottom ascent of Mount Everest, and then he disappeared, and nobody's seen him since. The book, it's a really interesting read. I highly recommend it. I also want to thank everyone who's ever left a review for the show on Apple Podcasts or wherever you listen to the show. People like Big Caps, Michelades, Gordon Faulkner, The Chainer, Music Man 76, Raining Fire Welding, Andrew Wadden, Chester 3000, DJ Nardo 77, GeoPete 77, Johnny Turbo 8, Old Shredder, and La Big House, just to name a few. I know a few of these guys, and if you're listening to this intro and you just heard your name, I mean it from the bottom of my heart. Thank you very much, you guys. Those reviews go a long way for people finding the show, and also they make me feel the best I could feel in the world. It's pretty epic. I've taken on an intern this year. It's intern Josh. I don't think you'll be hearing him on the show, but you might. He's helping me launch the show on YouTubes and YouTubes. I just said YouTubes. I'm old, man. We're going to have a YouTube channel where we play the audio from the show, and in the background, it'll be the sponsors, logos, and some snow falling and stuff. I think it's time to start the show. Season 7 of FNRad is sponsored by Wired Snowboards, the Boardroom Snowboard Shop, Anon Optics, Time Bomb Trading, and Tribute Board Shop in Nelson, BC. Wired Snowboards signed Canadian Super Pro Devin Walsh this season. Devin's Pro model is available at select snowboard shops around the world, and it's selling quickly. If your local shop doesn't carry Wired, make sure you tell them they should. All Devin's Pro models are handmade right here in Vancouver, BC, and Devin's long-standing friendship with Rob Dow, the Wired owner, is the foundation of a partnership that's going to bring you some sick snowboards. Check out wiredsnowboards.com for all the latest Wired news. Support for Season 7 also comes from Grouse Mountain, Mount Seymour, New Greens, the superfood greens drink sourced from North American farms, GoPro, and Volcom Outerwear. Thanks to everyone who supports the show. Legend Seth Wescott kicks off Season 7. Seth is one of the most successful competitive pro men's snowboarders ever. He was a part of the younger generation of halfpipe competitors who put the pressure on big dogs like Brushie and Terrier as halfpipe grew up from hand-built ditches to machine-groomed perfection. Seth competed professionally in halfpipe into the 2000s, and he took an empty slot in Boardercross at the X-Games, which started a string of wins that led him to 2 Olympic gold medals. He's currently got a shot at winning a 3rd Pro Men's Baker Bank Slalom in a row. Nobody's done that yet except for the women, Maya Ricker and Carlene Jeffrey. Seth's made the move to Pemberton, BC with his wife and children, a long way from where he grew up as a kid.
I mean, there's literally like 5,000 vert in the backyard right here.
Oh, dude, that's so sick.
Yeah.
That's insane.
It's insane.
So was that a childhood dream of yours to go to the Olympics at all?
No, not really. I mean, because I wasn't in any sport that
Where did you? So you grew up in Maine?
I grew up in Maine, northern easternmost state in the U.S.
Oh yeah, there's surfing there.
There is surfing there. Yeah,
there's good surfing. There's like good Nova Scotia and Maine.
Yeah,
and,
it's right there. So
yeah.
Like where I lived through all the years of travel and stuff, I was like 35 kilometers from the Quebec border.
Wow.
But we had slightly bigger mountains, like the Appalachians they terminate in Maine, like the Appalachian Trail, the northernmost peak is Mount Katahdin, which is a couple hours past my place. But the Appalachian Trail actually ran right through my valley. So there was like a 20-mile section with 4,000 foot peak.
Damn.
Sections. So it like for the East Coast
and actual East Coast,
2 hours from the Atlantic Ocean. So I could, once I got far enough in snowboarding that I didn't have to work in the summers, I could like run down to the coast anytime there was surf. I had buddies on the coast. And
you stayed out of Maine?
Well,
like you never got tempted to be out west?
I traveled so much. Like I did, so my parents both worked at universities. So they shut me down on going pro when I was like 18. They're like, wow, no way in hell. Like you're going to school.
Yep.
So I only applied to one school. I applied to Western State, Colorado.
Nice. Yeah.
So I was like, I didn't take school very seriously. I'd grown up around them in higher education, and I was just kind of like, it's not what I'm going to do. Like I couldn't stand sitting around, at least at that age. Like now I'm like, oh, it'd be kind of cool to like go back to school at some point for furthering my own education. But
totally,
as a 18-year-old, that wasn't a very enticing.
Did you grow up skateboarding and then so like East Coast skateboarding through that like 80s boom with the Bones Brigade?
All that. Like so my dad was a track and field coach. My mom was a modern dance professor. My dad had a master's in biology and like applied that to like how the human body works and how can I like help these young athletes be better runners, jumpers, throwers, all that kind of stuff.
Very cool.
He had an old 70s like sidewalk surfer plastic skateboard that I found probably at about 5. It was like up on an upper. We had at the time my parents were like super into antiques and stuff like that. Both grew up in New England. The two houses, my mom jokes about this, the old house, which was a 1790, and her new house, which is an 1860. And so in the 1790 house, it was kind of like this giant old rambling New England pseudo farmhouse. And there was like this giant pantry that had like big, compartments that you had to like climb. And so, like 5 years old, I like all of a sudden I'm like hanging on this thing and I'm like, the hell is this? And it was a skateboard. So, that like and because of them working on universities, there was a lot of unstructured time because being a kid of the 70s, like you waited in the car when you're at the grocery store and like all those different things that like are not accepted in society now. And like, I would just go to my dad's college campus because it was like 10 miles away. Like he would send one of his college students when we would get out of kindergarten or first grade. And we lived in that town until I was 8. So until that point, I was basically like, had this college campus to roam every afternoon. And then I'd come home with him after work. And so there were all these rad hills on this college.
Sick.
And it was a huge property. So like I would just go bomb around all the hills on this little red cruiser that carved really well. It's like so funny seeing, maybe like, well, I don't know, probably 20 years ago now, like when all the longboard carving boards came out, because it was like, well, I had soft urethane wheels and
the penny
carving board. Yeah, it was a penny board.
My kid's first board was a penny board. It was
so many years ahead of when that second wave of those came out. So it was like that. Yeah. For me, my parents weren't skiers, so I didn't get introduced to that until my mom got a grant to teach modern dance in this school. So we moved for 1 year to this town that had a ski hill. And so that was in 4th grade. So I had been skateboarding for like 3 years already.
Wow.
I'd get introduced to skiing for 1 year. And that became like the babysitter where like the school bus would just take you to the hill.
Yeah.
You were there until you got taken home on the school bus, and then your parents would come home from work. And it was that 80s. Yeah. Like, we weren't latchkey kids, but we were like, but you were in safe communities and like people were like, yeah, you're out recreating. I mean, they didn't call it that at the time, but it was like, whatever, the kids are playing and they're outside.
And where is this? Where was the ski?
It was in a town called Rangeley, Maine, and it was Saddleback ski area, which again had like 2,200 vertical on it. So it was a decent size ski. It wasn't a tiny hill.
We used to go, 4 hours or something, 5 hours from my hometown in Sudbury to Searchmont because it boasted 600 vertical feet.
Right. Yeah.
So 2,200, like,
it's like from the bottom of the half pipe on Blackcomb down, kind of like, which is a lot of ski mountain for a lot of places.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah. It's like Vermont, right? Like Vermont, or where did we go? Lake Placid. I was like, damn, man, this is good.
Totally.
It's good vertical.
Yeah. The snow's just not good that often.
No, it can be solid. But you know what? The grooming is better when,
nowadays
when the stuff is so firm.
Yeah, nowadays it's fine.
Yeah.
Back then when it was just like, it was basically a piece of farm machinery that was like the big tumble wheel behind the thing that did not make corduroy. But
no.
But yeah, so in 4th grade, I got introduced to skiing, and then we moved again the following year to another town that was like the town I ended up going all the way through high school at. And it had a skate scene. Like there was an actual, it was like 5 times the population of the town I'd lived in before. And so there was tar and parking lots and launch ramps and another college campus. So like, good curb scene and stair sets. And so skateboarding was it. And then that year was like the year that you started, like that I saw ISM come out. And like the start of snowboard magazines.
Right.
Like I remember going to this like Hallmark store that was like the only place that had a magazine rack. And I was going to get Thrasher. Yeah. Because like I knew the day that Thrasher came out every month. And it was like, here's the first issue of Trans World. And then later that year, the first issue of Snowboarder. And so like for me, it was just like, holy crap, like those first initial issues. Like I remember having a number of ISMs and then like, but it was still like paper. Yeah. It wasn't glossy or anything like that. And it was killer. But then, like with those 3 kind of all happened about that time. And because there was a skate scene of different generations there, then, and with that college too, like there were college skaters, when I was in 5th grade, you'd meet dudes who were 20 and
totally.
They were getting like the first back hills, the first woodies, the first elites. And because Burlington was only 4 hours away, Burton had a outsized influence on what, people were on Burton there because it was the close thing to get.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah. Like, like there were some sims, but like and it's funny too, because like I remember going into a ski shop early and this would have been before then and seeing a winter stick.
Wow.
With like full circle is so weird that was sick. Like the first thing I ever saw in a shop, but it was like, it was an early swallowtail that, had all the bumps on the top sheet.
Oh, wow.
And I think there was an early round tail as well. But I remember like this was even before we had moved to the place where I learned to ski. So this would have been like 3rd grade. So I don't know, 82 or something like that.
That's early.
It was early. And I was like, what is that thing? Like there was this shop in the town where my dad worked at the college. And it was called Skis or Us. And it was like, I used to just go in there because it was like, if we were at the mall and my parents were doing shit, I was like, well, there's at least some cool shit in here. And I'm going to like go check that out, even though I hadn't learned to ski yet. And I remember like seeing those early winter sticks.
How crazy is that? Yeah. Because that would have had to come from Dimitri.
Yeah, totally.
Like from Utah. He would have had to do a trip out there.
Well, or these guys as buyers going to a trade show would have seen his stuff at SIA but bought it, and for sure at that point they would have been intending that someone's going to go backhill because like there was no ski resorts in the state that allowed that yet. I remember that about equipment in the local shop. Like that it didn't match up with any demographic. They weren't trying to come up with, they were just like, they had a smattering of whatever was offered. Yeah. Like, could you tell me about this water ski? Well, no, not really. Well, and those guys had water skis at that shop too. And so who knows, like, I was too young to like have the balls to like talk to the owner or something at that point. I was just like in there staring at stuff, and he's like, oh, they have stickers. And like, it wasn't even a skate shop, which like there were other places in the state where there was only a few skate shops. So it was like a huge deal to go into those and like feel like you're actually a part of some culture.
It really felt like, because there was a California wave of music, of television shows, of fashion, of all that stuff when we were kids. Like, you wanted to do California stuff. You wanted to surf. That was, I remember someone telling me, like, you got to try surfing. It'll change your life. This is in Orillia, Ontario, the middle of nowhere. There's no surf anywhere for hundreds of thousands of miles.
Oh yeah. Well, and it is funny in retrospect too, because like there was, I think it was 86. I could be wrong on that year. Maybe it was 85, but it was like the two movies that came out that year that had that. It was like the first ones to attach something to it. It was Back to the Future. He's riding a skateboard.
100%.
And then View to a Kill with James Bond and Tom Sims snowboarding in it.
Yeah, those came out around the same time, right?
They were the same year. Like I've Googled this before.
Oh, wow. That's cool.
And it's like, I remember, because movies were such a big thing at that time, like you go to the theater and it was like, I was just getting old enough that it was like my dad had probably taken me to the James Bond movie. And it's like, there that is in that opening segment. And you're just
Steve
like,
Lank, Tom Sims. What are you talking about? It's just so beyond what was happening at the time.
And so then you'd like, go to this random sports store and there's one of those things there and you're like,
holy shit,
what is this?
That's really cool. I think a lot of people will have that, like a curiosity towards the sport before they do it. You know what I mean?
Oh, definitely.
Which makes it that much better when you do it, because you're like, oh, this is kind of easy. Like, I remember the first time I snowboarded, I was like, oh, I'm good at this. Yeah. Skateboarding, impossible.
Right.
Snowboarding, oh man.
Yeah.
Make the jump bigger. Was there anything else I could jump off of? Yeah, it was super easy. But I'd wanted to snowboard for a long time. So what becomes the first time you go snowboarding?
First time I go snowboarding was later the spring of that year of moving to that new town. I was night skiing at this little local hill, which was like a 400-foot hill.
Sure.
Had 2 T-bars, and they allowed these older high school kids that I knew through skateboarding to do a demonstration that night of snowboarding. Followed those guys around the whole night, and this one guy, Chris Loring, I kind of was like hitting those guys up because I had like just started a paper route, and I was like,
money to burn.
I was like, where do I get one of these things?
Sick.
And so I bought, the very next day, I bought his Burton Woody. It was a 145.
Yep.
And he would have known more. Like, I think he took that money and put it towards the Sims halfpipe. And he's like, oh yeah, kid, this is great. Like, you're going to love this on the East Coast with no edges. And,
was there rope hole for the nose?
No. It was like the Darth Vader bindings well, I think it did have a rope hole on it, I believe, but there was never any ropes on the Woody. I think that was like a weird holdover that they still did on that one.
Yeah. What year are we talking? We're talking 85, 86?
86.
86.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. So it had the center skeg.
Yeah.
But nothing on the sides.
Right.
So I had that for a couple yetle
oh, wow.
Until I got a board with edges. And then I got a barfoot twin tip.
Oh, what a board.
A board. It was the 161, which was way taller than me at the time.
Yeah.
That thing did not flex.
Metal bindings on it too.
But it was kind of like those bindings I felt like were technologically advanced for that moment.
Yeah, at that point. Yeah.
Yeah. But I had a same group of high school friends. This kid had started a skate shop in the town by that point.
Rad.
And he was the first one there that had snowboards in the shop. So like I would literally like borrow my dad's 10-speed bike because it was quite a ways out of town, and I'd like weekly ride over there to like put like my next $6 towards it or whatever, and like stare at it and be like,
Layaway. It's on layaway.
Oh, totally.
Man. I love layaway. That's so sick.
The place was called the Shred Shed, and I like would commute on, because I had a BMX bike, but I didn't have anything to travel long distances. So I would like steal my dad's 10-speed bike and ride over there and put more money down. And eventually
Paper route money.
Got it that winter.
Sick.
And,
was that a game changer for, did you get to ride resorts at that point on those things?
Yeah, a little bit. I got to ride the resort on the Woody for like a season. The first season was all just backhilling.
Yeah.
And we had really good hills in our town. Like at the night of that demonstration, the resort or like the town hill manager was like, yeah, over my dead body. And like snowboarding was not allowed there again until like I was in high school, and he literally passed away. So it was like literally like over his dead body. But
yeah, wow.
It was the whole like, oh, next you're going to want to ride the lunch trays and all this shit. And
sure.
Like, just that early.
You know what? They weren't wrong. We weren't that great of guests, to be honest, in those days.
No, maybe not. But something like that was literally a community run hill. You're like, dude, there's at least like 20 kids in this community who would want to do this. Our parents' tax dollars are paying for this, the operation of this place. So it was like a funny stance to take. But Sugarloaf was 42 miles up the road.
Oh, that's not that bad.
And they were already allowing it. And I could like, I had some friends' parents who were skiers, so they were going up there every weekend anyway, so I could like bum rides and go.
Perfect.
And
that's
was
actually
my entrance. Yeah.
That's the way it's got to work, right?
Yeah.
You've got to have access somehow. And you have to have access kind of regularly, Yeah.
It can't be once a season or something. But we like every afternoon we would go backhilling, like
Absolutely.
that there was snow. It was just like, sweet, this is awesome. And we had kickers all around town and started, we were riding tree lines and because coming from skateboarding, there was just such a quick changeover. And, winters were better back then. So there was more snow.
Totally.
Like you probably couldn't do that now in that town. Like there'd be a few weeks of the winter where there's snow on the ground, and
it's interesting. Yeah.
It's wild that it's that rapid that it's changed. But like, there were actually some sizable and really steep hills around town that like went down to these river bottoms where it was farmland, but there'd be, 200-foot section that some of it was 40 to 50 degrees. So like we learned to ride steeps right away.
Amazing.
And like old sand pits that were snowed in.
Sand pits are my favorite. Yeah.
So it was really cool to do that. And I had a friend that, his dad and he had a snowmobile. So like,
wow.
They lived right across from this huge farm field where the steep hill was. So like they would try to like get me off the water ski rope, and they like did water skiing in the summers too. So like, I got used to speed really quickly because like they'd have me going 75 miles an hour on this Burton Woody across this field. And I'd just be like, this is sick.
Yeah,
So
that's incredible.
Yeah.
So you were actually exposed to some of the stuff that like you don't equate with Maine. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Steeps going fast.
Totally.
That kind of stuff.
I mean, stuff that was way steeper than the ski hill.
Right.
But because we weren't allowed to go to the ski hill, you were like, well, where is there a place to use gravity here? And it was like, well, this looks rad. And
when you're a kid, you're just looking for something gnarly. And yeah. Was it basically like skating in the summer, snowboarding in the winter?
Yeah. And New England had a really good scene. Like we benefited from what was going on there. Like I got into, I think I was 13 when I got into competition because the New England Cup was going on.
Right.
So like Richards, Brushie, Jason Ford, Noah Brandon, like that generation was the generation older than me.
Yep. Yeah.
And I missed crossover with those guys by just a couple years because they were on to World Cup and whatever else. Like, Noah moved to Utah to ride powder because he got it early. And so there was, again, like somehow my parents would just like at 13 be like, oh, Tony's going to take you to Vermont for the weekend. And this was the guy that owned the shred shed. And he was 19 at the time, and so like, but they're like, all right, cool, whatever.
Yeah.
And so I started competing, and there was such a infrastructure to the competition setup then that it just created a pipeline. And like a year into it, I got picked up by Burton. So, like on Burton by the time I was a sophomore in high school.
Nuts.
Yeah, like getting to do your product orders and stuff like that in the fall. And it like that part of it felt so surreal, but
how did you get on the team? At a contest or something?
Chris Copley, who was the New England rep and, used to be the MC for the US Open forever. And I had bought a Burton Air 6-1, like the same board Brushie won the Worlds on in 91.
The purple one.
Yeah. And I T-nutted it because the stance...
You needed it wider.
You needed it wider. Yeah. And so I snapped it, and I went back to riding the purple Craig Kelly, like the paintbrush, like his second one, minus the mystery. And we were at Bolton Valley, Vermont, and I won not my age group, but all the age groups. Like I beat the 18-year-olds, the 20-year-olds.
Nice. At like 14, 15 or something?
Like had a really good day in halfpipe, was, going well overhead. And
nice.
And at the end of the day, Copley was announcing, he's like, you need to come to the van with me. And he handed me Brushie's first pro model, the Fish.
Oh, wow.
So that was like my first...
what a day.
Yeah.
You
awesome
sleep with it
day.
in your bed that night?
Sure I did. So
that's incredible. And the new bindings, like the 3D hole
it was
pattern,
it was the first year of 3D.
Oh my God. That was insane.
It was insane. And so I was on his program for like a year, just like through the rep program.
Rider,
and then the next year he was like, this guy, Mike Lavecchia, who's the team manager, is going to call you, put an order together. It was like awesome.
Oh my God. So, but you've mentioned already your parents were like kiboshing the like pro, like move away and be a pro.
And at that point,
dream.
They weren't yet, because I wasn't talking to them about that. But like they also were like, like packages started showing up on the porch the next fall from Burton, and like,
were they like,
they were like, what's going on?
How did we pay for this? Did you take our credit card? Or?
No.
Were they?
They were supportive of it, and they knew what was going on. Like, like once a year, my dad would be like, okay, like I'll take you to this one in Vermont, and like, or in New Hampshire, and like I'd make the podium, and he was like, well, that's pretty cool. There's a lot of kids here, and so
awesome.
So it started that way, just organically, and then, and then because right up the road was CVA at Sugarloaf, so like Fawcett being the first one to go there, Jeremy coming year 2, that whole scene, and at this, like I was trying to think, probably by the end of the second year of competition, Eric Webster was running the program there, who like now he runs all the Grand Prix tours and all this stuff. But he was like, he knew I couldn't afford to go to the school because it was a ton of money. But he would go out of his way, and like there was a northern way to drive to Vermont and a southern way, which he'd have to come down. And so he started like bringing the team and picking me up on Friday night, like when they were going to Green Mountain Series and stuff. And so I started being able to travel with those guys.
That's rad.
Which was huge. And I think that probably allowed my parents to like have more of a belief in A, that I was going to be all right out on the road when I disappeared for 3 days, and B, that it was like something going on because the academy had an interest. And then for my senior year of high school, I got a scholarship to go. So I moved up to Sugarloaf for the winter. And snowboarded.
Again, how amazing is this?
Yeah, totally.
Like best thing ever.
Oh yeah. And like,
who else was there at that time?
Jeff Greenwood was in my class, who won world championships for giant slalom like 2 years later.
Yep.
Jeremy graduated the year before me. So I was class of 94. Jeremy was class of 93. And then like the year, there was like right behind me was Aki Matsumoto, who was from Nagano. We had like 3 Japanese guys there at the time. Aki's still a good friend that I go spend time with in Hakuba, and he does all of Jeremy's stuff for Jones in Japan.
Oh, rad.
So there's like a ton of like like really cool from our high school days all the way through to current life, connections there. And then, just a bunch of good friends. Like a year later, Paul Chapman, who was from Ontario and ended up being like junior overall world champion. There was a really good group of talent there around that time period. And transitioning from like, you know, it was very Alpine centric at the beginning because of Jeremy and Mark and Adam Hostetter and Troy Collins and all those guys. And I was kind of the first generation of like, I'll go race the Alpine stuff and I'll train that one day a week, but like really I'm going to go hike the half pipe all day.
And Sugarloaf had a
pipe early on. It wasn't a cut one at that point yet. Like the year after I graduated, they got a machine, but like there was probably only like 2 pipe dragons in the US in 1994. 94. Stratton was still cutting theirs with the excavator for the Open. It wasn't, but like we had a good enough one that when I moved to Colorado for a year and a half, convinced my parents that on the second year, I was like, I'll go to school for the first semester. I'm coming home at Christmas and I'm going to go back and do a post-grad year at CVA. And so they bought into that, which worked. Cause the first year I basically didn't go to school. I moved.
You got to tell me, what was it like?
It was awesome.
What year would that be?
The 94-95 winter.
Oh, what a great time.
Crested Butte had an epic year. It was the first year of the US Extremes there. So like I jumped right into like free riding in that. Like the week of the Extremes, we had a 4-day storm where we got 109 inches and they held all the venues for us. So we had like,
oh my God,
unbelievable. Like for me to like transition out there and like that fall, I had a buddy who had an old 70s Toyota Land Cruiser. He'd put all 4 chains on it. We could get way deep into the backcountry early season. There's this Schofield Pass between Crested Butte and Aspen. It's really a summer Jeep road, but like there's some stuff where you can go back like 10 miles early season, winter camp for the weekend, like in October, November. So even before the hill opened, like we were just instantly like going out camping for the whole weekend, take a keg of beer with us. Like we didn't have, like I had a good down sleeping bag, but I'd just take a tarp and just like roll myself up like a taco in that, like no tech equipment whatsoever. But we were having a blast. And then the local shop there, the Colorado Border, who like Chris Ingelsman rode for and Barrett Christie rode for, and like had a whole crew. The owner, Seth Wiener, took me on, like, I just like showed up like, you know, like first weekend of school in September. And like, it was the first time I'd driven up to Crested Butte, and I was like, hi, I'm Seth. I ride for Burton. I want to like ride for your shop. And he was like, all right, sure. Like we had the same first name, and he knew nothing, you know, but he just like took a chance. And then,
riding for Burton's a pretty, at that time, it was a pretty big deal.
It was a pretty big deal.
Yeah.
And so that, like, so then I all of a sudden had an in there, and, you know, met a bunch of guys through the shop that would show me around the hill, learned the hill quickly there. And then like that year, I had some early opportunities, like got an opportunity to film with a group out of, Hood River, Rod Parmenter. He was making a movie. And so really I just started like using my dorm room as a hotel room, and like house, traveling. Like I had very little money. Like, I mean, I always had a job in the summers when I was home. And so like I would take the Greyhound all over the West Coast.
Wow.
And it was like to get from Gunnison to Hood River was like a 3-day bus trip because of the routes. And like, so I'd have my Walkman and one of those big tape cassette, like it had like 50 tapes, and I'd just be like, whatever, like I got my board bag, get the back seat of the bus, and just like set up shop, eat almost no food because there wasn't budget for that. And like like go all over. And like
So what are the movies? What
the movie was called Stadium.
Okay.
And it was a movie that I forget what his film company was called. He was really like a windsurf film dude. Because
Hood
of the
River,
gorge.
obviously.
Yeah. And like,
who were his guys? Like,
Risto Scott was in it.
Sick.
Like there was a bunch of like, he knew a ton of Pacific Northwest guys. Matt Donahue.
Nice.
Steve Adkins and Weege from Baker. Like Craig was in it. You know,
that's
like,
incredible.
Yeah, it was like a random.
Yeah, no, there was lots of random.
There was lots of random movies at that time, and like, so yeah, like I got this opportunity, and I was like, hell yeah, like I'll travel. You know, so like we came up here to film. Like my first film section was coming here. I'd never been here before. Came to Blackcomb, hitting the quarter pipe, hitting the wind lip, riding the first park jump shack. You know, there was only one shack jump at the time.
Yeah.
Like I don't even know how long they'd had the park before that, but yeah, we came up here, like went to the boot the first night. I wasn't even, I think I would have been 19. Yeah. So it was like, you know, eye opening for me, and like 2 years before I could drink in the States. And, yeah, like just got on that program, and that spring, like I was riding for Twist Clothing.
Sick.
So this predated Super Park, but Snowboarder did a house at Mammoth. And so I got to go down and shoot with Justin Hosnick because of the Twist connection.
Yeah.
And yeah, just kind of like was like, all right, I'm just doing this.
Twist was sick.
It was
so good.
Awesome at that time.
If somebody's going to reissue anything, they got to do Twist.
That whole collab of where those guys were at, like between Justin and Trent and Troy Bush, and the artwork and like the kind of like Japanese influence on all that, and the cartoons of all the team members, and so yeah, like I got a double page in Snowboarder hitting this backcountry quarter pipe from Justin that next fall, and like the movie came out. It was my first. Like I'd had a small shot in SNO board, doing a crooked cop at Sugarloaf.
Nice.
But yeah, it was like I got a 2-page spread with Hosnick in the first fall issue of Snowboarder, and I was just like, I'm not going back to college, Mom and Dad. Like I am doing this.
Did you have photo incentives from Burton at that time, or were you still?
I was actually off Burton for about a year and a half.
Okay.
I didn't know that yet, like when I'd showed up in Colorado.
Yeah.
You know, weird Burton stuff, and I know lots of weird Burton stuff from over the years. They're like, you're going to school.
Yeah.
They're like, you're not going to snowboard. I'm like, no, I'm really not just going to school.
How crazy is that they could say that to a kid that's school-aged, right?
Totally.
Being like, you know what, if you're going to go to
school, if you're going to go to college, you're off the team.
And they're not the only one that did it.
Oh,
like,
totally.
All the snowboard brands at the time, that was the status quo. It was how are you going to get out there if you're going to be spending all your time, wasting your time at school?
Yeah.
Oh,
exactly.
God.
So
nuts.
That happened probably like the second week of September. You know, like I kind of was like, hey, I landed here in Gunnison. I'm way closer to the mountains. I'm stoked.
Super
and they're
psyched.
like, yeah, too bad, man. Like, sorry you're going to school.
You're out of your territory.
Yeah,
like
you're done. And
oh, wow. So what happens
for
boards?
So I had another main connection, this guy who had run a different one of the main skate shops, who had known me since I was a kid. He had also moved to Hood River, and this is kind of like how all this falls in place. He was starting a new snowboard company called Spry that was owned by Aunt Mabel's, the accessory company.
Yeah.
And he called me up and he was like, hey, I think you're riding for Burton. Like he must have called my parents to get my dorm room number. Cause there was a phone message waiting on my dorm room phone. And, he's like, yeah, give me a call. I think I can pay you some money every month. And so that was like, I was like, perfect. I just got cut. So let's do it. And then, so he is who set up the movie thing through Parmenter. And yeah, everything kind of started rolling that year. And then Spry only lasted like 2 years.
Yeah. Was that full page, 2-page spread on a Spry?
Yeah, it was actually.
Yeah, man, that's so sick for them.
Yeah, totally.
That's incredible.
Yeah. So then the fall, like that following winter, I go home to like do the post-grad year, the next winter, like from, Christmas on. First Pro Tour event is at Vail. So like go home, ride pipe for Christmas, fly out with a bunch of the other CVA guys that were all doing that. And like I'd competed in the US Open already a couple times at that point. Like,
how'd you do?
My senior year of high school, I did pretty good. Like, cause you used to have to go through all these rounds. So I made it to semis as a senior in high school. I got 21st. Brushie was 20th. Mike Bassich was 22nd.
Oh my God.
So I was like, I'm kind of in around like my heroes.
Hell yeah.
Yeah. I was stoked. Like it was a 16 person final. So I didn't make the final, but as I was 17, my senior year of high school, I was like, I'm pretty friggin' pumped.
Yeah, no doubt.
And like, Ross Powers and I that year had like, he's a few years younger, but we competed against each other our whole lives growing up back there.
Yeah.
And so we were both like doing back-to-back sevens already from Green Mountain Series when like most of the World Cup guys weren't.
Right.
So it was like, that was an early, like kind of throwing down some runs. And like, I got introduced to Trevor Graves at that first one because he and Eric Webster were buddies. And Eric was like, "Hey, will you shoot Seth on this first hit?" And
Trevor's so rad. Totally. I had him on the show. I was so, he had a lot to say about New England.
Yeah.
Scott Klum and the whole early days out there. Yeah. He's awesome.
He is.
So
there was,
you shoot with Trevor like pretty.
I never did. Other than like at that Open, like I never saw a photo from it. I'd love if he would ever go into his archives to dig one out. I don't even know if we ever pushed the shutter, but Eric introduced us at the, like as we're hiking the pipe, and so who knows, that might be out there somewhere. But yeah, like so the first year at the Open goes well. Next year didn't go as well, but I really hadn't ridden half pipe all year because I was just riding around Colorado, and didn't have access to a pipe all the time.
It sounds like the CVA thing gives you like a community of competitive snowboarders too. So like, you're kind of in this mindset where you're like, you don't have the jitters at the contest. You're around your friends anyways.
Totally.
You're like waiting for your run as opposed to being afraid.
Exactly.
Like, that's so much.
So that first event, after dropping out of college, come home for like 10 days, fly out there. I'd been to Vail once before because we'd had national championships there when I was like 13. It was like the first place I'd ever gone in the West. So I kind of knew the layout and liked that half pipe. And it was a big one. Like there was a big international contingent, huge North American contingent. Like I think it was 135 guys in pipe.
Wow.
I got third.
Come on.
And I forget, either Richards won or Brushie won, but it was Richards, Brushie, and I on the podium. And this was like my first one that I've done.
Holy shit.
So I'm like, all right, like I have a prize money check. I can go to Kirkwood next week. Cause I didn't know, like I kind of went out there like having not much budget. And so literally like that Sunday evening, I call into my team manager at Spry and he's like, "I got some bad news. The company's closing."
Oh God.
So I'm like, shit. Like I literally just got on ESPN for you guys. This is going to like be on next week, so Burton took me back immediately. Like I had boards waiting for me in Kirkwood, like the night, like after that result and the following weekend, like I get to the hotel in Kirkwood and there's the new custom 5.5.
Nice.
It's like, sweet.
Yeah.
So that just kind of like rolled back in. And then I was with them, through like 2000, end of 2001, which was awesome because like that late 90s, it was a cool time to be a part of it. And like,
hell yeah,
like going to X Games and like being at the team house and going to Europe, like the 99 World Championships, like they rented like 2 floors of this whole hotel in Italy for us. Like Ross and I were rooming together, like it was like,
who are you guys?
Mickey Albin was on that floor.
Wow. Mickey Albin.
I don't know if Trevor was there yet or not, Andrew.
He would have been young.
He was young. Well, and I remember his first open because he would come down and ride Sugarloaf a little bit. And like, because Sugarloaf kept such a good pipe, like there was a weird connection where like DCP would show up sometimes and like out of the blue, and no one was like calling each other ahead, but you'd like just go to the pipe that day and you're like, hey, it's Daniel Mignon and DCP like are here today. Sick. Like we're going to have a rad session. And, but Abe Teeter, Adam Petraska, I like Abe, Adam and Ross and I ran together quite a bit for like those first few years on World Cup.
Yeah.
And like there was, I don't know if it was, I guess it would have been the year after Nagano. Like, cause that, like, so that year, like oddly enough, the first ever Olympic halfpipe qualifier that ever happens at Sugarloaf in December.
So do you win that?
I got third. I podiumed.
Okay. So you podium.
So I'm in the running for Nagano.
Totally.
I crash both in Bachelor and Mammoth.
So you didn't make the team?
No. But like was in the hunt legitimately.
Totally.
For Nagano.
It was such a weird time in competition then too, right?
Yeah,
like it's not like it is now where you just accept that the Olympics is a really big deal in the snowboard community.
And no one knew what was going to happen that first
like
time around.
Almost like a second tier thing a little bit because of there was...
Totally. Well, and we like, I look at it, especially at that age, like early 20s, like it was like being a journeyman that like, this is how I'm making a living right now.
Yeah.
I don't have any family money.
Right.
I have no other, like, I've dropped out of college.
Right.
I own a $1,500 Volkswagen.
Totally.
And I am committed to doing every event I can. Like, doing all the Vans Triple Crowns.
Those would have been fun.
Those were awesome. Oh. That was an amazing.
Yeah. That put Vans back on the map.
Well, I remember the first one that was at Breckenridge.
Yeah.
And it was like, you're like standing in this registration line and it's like, all the Euros are here.
Yeah.
And like everyone's here. Like the whole friggin' world is here.
Yeah.
And like it was like crazy, you know? And because like I didn't do the first X Games. I did the second one through I don't know. I think I did 18 years of them.
Yeah.
Like,
you did a lot of them.
I did a lot of them.
Yeah.
And I didn't do them as a border crosser originally. Like I was going there as a half pipe guy. And oddly enough, like the second one, which was the first year in Crested Butte.
Yeah.
I was there to do half pipe. They're like, hey, we've got 3 open spots in border cross. Who wants at it? And it was like, oh, I'll do it. And
and you've trained Gates, so like you know how to go fast.
Totally. And like, and there was no stigma around it in any way because it was like Terrier had actually just beat Palmer at the World Championships the year before.
Right.
You know, like
it was legit. It was
legit. Yeah. And because I still hadn't done a Swatch event yet, I hadn't done a ISF border cross. I'd done ISF half pipes in Europe, but I was like, I'll do that. And then I ended up
3 spots.
Totally. Sure. I ended up making the podium. Like Palmer wins, Jason Brown second, I get third. And I'm like, holy shit. And at that point, that was like my biggest prize money check. It was like $2,500. I was like,
that was what changed the game. The X Games changed it with money and and media coverage. You became like a celebrity when you won an X Games.
Oh, I remember it was so bizarre that like going to that first one that I went to, and it was kind of like because it was year 2, ESPN had their shit together a little bit more than like when they did it in Snow Summit. And it was like, whoa, this is a whole other level. You know, it's not just like a guy in front of the start thing of the half pipe with one camera and a guy somewhere on the...
There's like storylines of the people that won last year.
Cameras, there's like, you're getting sat down for interviews. You're like, holy shit.
Oh, that's so sick.
A whole other world.
How'd you do in the half pipe at that one?
I was 5th.
Yeah, so you're almost there. I was thinking about the fact that just when you're talking about the Vans Triple Crown and saying everybody's there, when you talk to people that really competed at that level, right? Like when your podium includes Terrier or Todd Richards.
Yeah.
Both those guys have said on podcasts that you know, you don't care about the Olympics. The best guys aren't there.
Yeah, totally.
You care about these like events where everybody's there and then who's going to win.
Yeah.
Like I want to compete against, Terry wants to compete against Todd and Craig when it was Craig.
Right.
Actually, I think Terry never beat Craig. I think that was a thing.
Was it really?
Yeah, Craig held it against him forever.
Craig sneaked out.
He snuck out right when. He's like, you know what? I'm going to go out on top.
Yeah. Well, and that's like, so the first event that I saw, and I had done some New England Cups, but the first pro event that I saw was the 91 US Open.
Okay.
My dad took me and my best friend down. My dad knew a family who their kid had run track for him in college. So he had a place where we could stay like 20 minutes away.
Nice.
Craig was in that final. Jimmy ended up winning, but it was kind of like, it was one of Jimmy's years. But it was like, they kind of had this weird like bracketing. So it ended up as this like super final where it was Andy Hetzel, Jimmy, Craig, and I forget who the fourth was now.
Jacoby or
it was someone like, but we saw everyone, you know, and like, I still remember like Palmer is the first guy that I saw, like where you're actually seeing a professional snowboarder for the first time in your life, like not in a magazine.
Totally.
Like I come up through this underground thing and it was his first year of having the clown board. It was turned around the other way so you could see the American flag base. And I just see the Sims base as I'm like coming over the top of these stairs and I'm like staring at it. And then I like look over and he's doing this weird, like one of his goofball faces back at me because I'm just some kid staring at him, you know?
I love it.
And then I'm like, holy shit, it's Sean Palmer, you know? And it was like kind of that realization, like where it was like, I knew I was going there to like watch these guys snowboard, but you kind of somehow didn't realize that they're all going to be there.
Yeah.
And
that's so sick.
Yeah. And seeing Craig ride halfpipe, you know,
when he's
live that
91
year.
91 is Craig's year.
Yeah, totally. It was a great year.
Did you ride with him at all when
I never
during
got
the Burton
to
stuff? Yeah, it's a big team and
huge team. I wish.
And he's gallivanting but I mean, you were close when you're in Hood River because
oh, totally.
Based out of Bend around that time.
Yeah, I think that was before he had come up to Canada.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I think
it was too.
Yeah. But that
he was probably still Glacier, I think, too. At that point.
Yeah, totally. So what happens on the 98 year when people are going to the Olympics? Do you feel like was there a feeling of like, fuck, I should have made it, I could have made it, or
it was a feeling of like it was a possibility. Yeah, you know, and like I didn't really feel that let down because it was like there was so much going on. Yeah. You know, like I talk to kids now that, you know, like whether it's someone I'm mentoring or like someone I know that's just the younger generation and like they can't fathom how much was going on, you know, like we would start competing like the 10th of November and there would be an event somewhere in the world every single weekend until the end of April. Right. You know, like West Beach Classic or something up here. You know? And it was just, there was so much money available in that late 90s as a competitor that you could be a competitive snowboarder. And it's like now there's like 6 World Cup events. Yep. And there is no pro tour below that. There's no like, we used to have like secondary pro tours. Like for a while in the late 90s, there was the American Skiing Company bought up all these New England resorts. Sugarloaf was one of them. And I sat on this board of directors for a little bit to like help them with snowboarding. And it was when Burton started the Learn to Ride program. So like I sat in on those meetings at Burton for the first time. I got to be a poster boy for that, like for the Learn to Ride program.
That's rad.
Me and Johnny Mosley, like
nice.
The year after he won Nagano. And, but then they started like a different other pro tour just at those New England resorts. So if I had a weekend off, I would go home to New England, drive to whether it was Mount Snow, Killington, Sunday River, Sugarloaf. And there was like, you'd have a big air, a half pipe, and a border cross. The big air would be under the lights on Saturday night. Half pipe was probably Saturday. Border cross was probably Sunday. And you could walk with like $3 or $4 grand prize money from a weekend again as like a 21, 22-year-old.
Yeah, man.
And, you know, like they'd give you free hotel rooms if you'd come do it. So you didn't really even like have any cost other than your gas money.
Unreal.
And that went on for like 2 or 3 years.
Yeah.
So there was like this little window. And at that point in New England, especially, every resort was competing with each other to have a better half pipe. So there was like 19 or 20 half pipes in New England that were cut every day.
Can you imagine?
And like, there aren't 19 or 20 half pipes in North America
Not
now.
in North America, not in Canada and the U.S. combined.
And this was in a 6-hour driving circle. And like that explosion of talent, like that was Kelly Clark, Danny Cass, Kiera Dillon, Ross, myself, Lindsay Jacobellis. Like you look at,
it's the golden age of competition.
there was
so
this
awesome.
amazing window that New England provided.
What was your size?
My last year, so I maintained a quota spot for the U.S. on World Cup through the 2003 year.
Okay.
So that was staying top 16 in the world.
Wow.
Earned you a spot. And like that year, 2003 World Championships, I was one of 2 Americans to make the pipe final. We were in Kreisberg, Austria. I ended up 9th. And the writing was on the wall as far as like me at 185 pounds at that point, almost 6'2", versus like, you know, we'd have training camp at Hood in the summer and like watching Sean at 120 pounds and Tiny being able to flip and spin. Like, I just saw that was the writing on the wall.
2006 for him was the first year that he won it, or
no, he
won
didn't
it
make
2002.
Yes, no, it was 2006. You're right.
He didn't make 2002.
He didn't make 2002. I think he just missed it. Like, I think he was first alternate.
Okay.
Holy shit. He hadn't quite come into himself yet. You know?
And so in 2003, what size the pipe? 18 feet?
18.
Yeah. So did you prefer 18 over 14? Like as they got bigger, did you step up and you're like, okay, this is even better because we can go bigger now?
You can go bigger. Like, like that night in Kreisberg under the lights.
Yeah.
We had Thanos Karidos, who is the creator of Dominator.
Rad.
He was doing my board, and it was like all you could do to keep it under your feet. It was so slick, you know. Like I had I was coming up for a Hawken on like third hit, and just kind of like it just came out from underneath me, and I didn't get my throw, so it was like I was probably like 12 feet out, upside down, no other rotation, and I landed like upside down, like shoulders cleared the lip by an inch, and I just landed like no impact down the transition.
Nice.
Came back to the top. I was like, that's fast enough. You know, that was like the last practice run before dropping in for finals. And it was like, you've nailed it. Like I'm going bigger than I've ever gone. Yeah. And it was cool. That's and then so I had a couple, the 04 season, I did a few more World Cups, like I did World Cup finals in Switzerland at Arosa that year, and had I was scaling back my technicality. You know, it was like a little bit of like following Terrier, being like,
of course,
like the friggin' gymnastics riders, and that. I'm like, you know, it is way more fun to just like really tweak some straight airs as big as I can,
of course,
and simplify things. And I remember like I'm hoping someday I can like find someone at Eurosport to like find the footage from that, because I never saw it, but it was like the biggest air to fakies I ever did.
Rad.
You know, just like such a good feeling, and then kind of being like, cool, like I'm out of this cycle. I don't have to maintain the spot anymore, because like this next generation is coming through. Yeah. Which was rad. I mean, that's a pretty long. It was a good run. It was a good run. 94 US Open to 04. Yeah, man. Of being in pipe was a cool. And that's the best years of pipe. That's where everything moves. Yeah. From, you know, hand dug, small, shitty to like 18-foot, like perfect pipes. Yeah. Have you ridden? Obviously, you have like some super pipes at 22 feet. How do you feel about? They're rad. I haven't gotten to do it in good conditions. Like, I was down in Cardrona. I don't know, probably like the summer of 2017, and dropped into theirs, and it was like, wow.
Is it like riding a bike, or is it like this?
Well, it's a little bit like riding
to...
a bike, but it's also like I am going so friggin' fast, and like, and then you're like, you barely cracked the lip.
Yeah,
you're like,
you'd be like,
I have to go so much faster, and having a few runs where you're like, oh yeah, no, I am going huge now, but it was like crazy, the pace change from an 18 speed to a 22.
It's got to be insane.
There were still some years where like at certain venues, like I remember Drew Nielsen and I, like we'd just kind of like be like, hey, we're forerunning today, you know, and like going and just like the contest is going on, but we'd like poach it. And like Ross and I had a like that at my last best pipe session was same thing. Like Ross was racing Boardercross now at this point. This would have been 2000, I don't know, maybe 11. We were in Italy for World Cup finals, and they had a really nice soft half pipe, and I was actually riding it on a Burton fish.
Rad.
And just like going really big on a Burton fish in perfect corn pipe conditions. And I think like half the kids that were riding half pipe at that point on the Fist Tour like didn't even know who Ross was riding it. You know, he's like doing huge McTwists and stuff, and they're like, "Who's that guy?" Like, he's friggin' the champ.
Yeah, exactly. It's crazy. Like, so I started this podcast like 7 years ago.
Yep.
And I remember for the first couple of years, the theme really was, we don't look back, you know, we're always kind of looking forward for so long.
Yeah.
But so we haven't hit at all any Boardercross racing, really. Like, so you get this call to Boardercross as just a like, hey, do you want to do it?
Yeah.
Had you ever done Boardercross? Like
I had done one grassroots event in Maine.
Okay.
Like in 96.
Okay, that's really early.
It was really early for
Boardercross.
that. Yeah.
Like I know Jay Baumer was talking about the West Beach Classic. He did a kind of precursor to Boardercross. It was like an obstacle course.
Yeah.
Right? Like you had to swing on a Tarzan rope or something. Like it was like literally not what you think of as Boardercross.
Totally.
Palmer, by the way, claims to have completely created Boardercross when he went to France with...
He's told me that story many times.
Yeah, right?
Because Palmer and I traveled together for a few years.
Of course.
And which was so rad being like so much later, because he kind of like was away from it for a while and then stepped back in.
Totally.
Because he really wanted to go to the Olympics.
He wanted to go to the Olympics bad. Yeah, really bad.
But yeah, they like the story that Palmer tells me is they were living, there was like kind of like a closet in the bottom of the stand for a ski jump in Sham.
Wow.
And they were like camping. They're like, they found this room where they could camp in the bottom of a ski jump. And he was like bored and like built a, shoveled out a course there. And it's like, oh, I got something here. Like,
this would be fun.
This would be cool.
And then I think he was just talking about it.
Yeah.
With one of the Swatch guys.
The
Swatch guy's like, this is money.
Yeah, totally.
And then like trademarked it or something.
Yeah.
Fuckers.
Yeah. Exactly.
Palmer's got to be one of just as big a fan as I am of Craig. I'm also that big a fan of Palmer.
Totally.
It's kind of like being a child of the 80s.
Yeah.
Movies would pit like a Tony Hawk versus Christian Hosoi.
Yeah, exactly. That was their battle. It was and like that Breckenridge halfpipe where Palmer won. Yeah. And that was a actual legitimate snowboarding rivalry that like whether Craig felt that way about it, or I know Palmer felt that way about it, sure. And I know the media made something of it, but it's like the good versus evil, the Kelly versus Andy, like in surfing, like it's like it's all that.
The Palmer taking bong rips instead of training,
totally.
right? Or Jack Daniels or whatever it was.
Exactly.
I just, I'm drunk and I'm going to win it.
Yeah.
And he would.
And he would. Yeah.
Because he was that badass.
Yeah.
But when he hit Boardercross, something just clicked in that. Like it was like near impossible to beat that guy. Did you beat him obviously later on you bet him. Did you beat him in his prime as well?
Well, no, it was the tail end of his prime. But there's a weird there was a weird year where, and it was the first X Games in Mount Snow, so the fourth X Games, the third one I'd done.
Yep.
There was this moment that was caught on tape, but it wasn't what they focused on when he got hurt. So he and Drew Nielsen were like having this duel. I'm sitting in third place.
Yeah.
They both overshoot this big hip at the bottom, and I'm like, I'm winning the X Games. Like, all I have to do is hit the finish kicker.
Yeah.
Like, because Drew was like crawling over it. I'm mocking. I'm like, I'm going to pass him in the air. Palmer's like getting up, and Palmer goes to exit the course because he didn't have the speed to get over the finish kicker.
Yeah.
And he's going like through my line.
Oh, God.
And so I literally, there's like the left-hand panel stubby. I set my toe side edge, so I'm not going to DQ.
Yeah.
And it becomes apparent that I'm going to hit him. And I just lower my shoulder and at 45 miles an hour, take him right in the back.
Oh, God.
And it was like those metal ball things that, like office people used to have on their desks and stuff. And Palmer clears the table. Like, I hit him so hard, it accelerated him over the table. I come to almost a full stop. Like, my momentum is dead. And, but he like lands on the other side and just crumples. And this is like what they focused on was like, Palmer's down. But like, It was weird how they did the pan. It was like almost out of frame, the impact. And, so it actually like popped ribs off his sternum.
Oh, fuck.
And he like, and so this, I didn't know him well at this time. I'd met him, a few times.
Yeah.
But, and especially at that time, like, I'm still a pretty young kid. Palmer's pretty notorious. They take him away in the sled. That's the end of the show. Drew ended up winning, or no, I forget. Either Drew won or maybe Scott Gaffney like came from behind me and passed and wins. Drew second.
Yeah.
I end up fourth because everyone else just came with momentum, and I was like jumping.
Stop.
I was jumping up the lip to like.
That's the worst.
Damn it! And
you're like, I'm winning this.
I know. I was like, here it is. I'm gonna win. It's like third time's a charm, and so like I break his ribs and don't see him again till the next year. And then like there's a story going around by the next year that it's like, Palmer's going to kick Wescott's ass. Like the first time he sees him. Oh, no. And I'm like, never been in a fight in my life. Like, I'm just like, oh man, this is like kind of freaky.
Yeah.
And so the first time I see him was X Games the next year.
Oh God. He
just comes up to me. He's like, hey dude, check this out. And like takes my hand and like rubs it over these bumps, where his ribs had healed back up, but was like, hadn't really healed the way you'd want your ribs to be feeling. And he's like, oh man, like that hurts so bad. And he's just like totally cool. Everything's good. Yeah.
He's such a nice guy.
He
actually is
he is. And I don't know who started the rumor that he was going to kick my ass. Right, and maybe he had just to like fuck with me.
Sure.
But
why not?
Whatever. But he's never been anything but nice with me. And we've had a lot of fun on the road over the years.
Of course. Oh, that's dope, man. Thanks for sharing that story. Cause I can't believe you ran into him like full gas.
Oh yeah.
So does he play any role in you like taking border crosses, like, because at some point you just become the border cross guy?
Yeah, I mean, so what happened at that 03 World Championships? I'm in half pipe final. Next day is border cross. Delarue ends up winning his first World Championships. I'm second. Drew Nielsen's third. We're in the press conference. Austrian media is like, hey guys, like it was announced yesterday that snowboard cross is in the Olympics.
Sick.
And we're kind of like all looking at each other. And we were also, this was like the first year we had done FIS because ISF had died the following spring. And
R.I.P. ISF.
Yeah.
Man.
And we were not into doing FIS. And we were also like, we're like, hey, look, the ISF won the FIS World Championships. You know, we're like, we're all full fuck FIS at that point.
Yes.
And like, there was a ton of animosity about it. But we also like kind of look at each other and it's like, well, it's kind of cool that in 3 years, like we could be doing this for
Olympic medal.
For an Olympic
God
medal.
damn.
Yeah. So that like put it into my head where it was different than like, the first time around in Nagano, it could have been a possibility that I could have, got on a third or fourth spot for the team for a pipe, but being like, well, I'm the best American at this and
Sick.
I'm going to friggin' work my ass off these next 3 years. And so then 2 years later, World Championships is here at Blackcomb. I win the World Championships a year out from Torino. Going to Torino as the world champ, and like I had qualifying go my way early, like down in South America and Chile in September, but then kind of like a bunch of things just hadn't gone great, but I knew I was riding really well. And like a week before at X Games, I don't even really remember what happened that year, but there were a bunch of years once it moved to Aspen, like where I won time trials, sometimes by big margins.
Yeah.
Things just didn't go right in the heats. Like, so I knew I'm like, well, if I'm riding this by myself, I'm the fastest guy in the world.
Right.
If other people run into my edge or like, like a lot of shit can go wrong before you get up to speed.
It's such a crazy game.
Totally. And there'd be super frustrating times like that.
Somebody grab your jacket or stuff. I guess at the pro level, you're not really touching.
And like out of the top 15 guys in the world were really clean. And like, me and Delarue and Drew and like Uli Kestenholtz at the time and like different people, like we'd even talk to each other on the course. Like if you were on someone's heel side and they couldn't see you, be like, hey, I'm here, because it was especially in early rounds. And this was a little bit of like what Drew and Zav and I talked about it a bunch of times where we're like, we want to beat all the FIS riders. Like we don't want someone from FIS to win these events. Like the guys who had committed to FIS early on.
Absolutely, dude.
So we would literally like work together during the early heats. Because there was a feeling
that the FIS guys were kind of second tier for me.
Totally.
I remember that.
Totally.
The FIS was not as good as the ISF.
Yeah.
Like you wanted to win the ISF.
Oh yeah.
That was like world champ.
That was being the world champ.
Yeah.
And so like it's that. That started to shift when there was no more ISF, but we were still like, well, fuck the FIS guys. We still want to like have the ISF riders win.
Yeah.
And so, so we would even just talk to each other in heats and be like, all right, like we're going this way, like high, low, whatever. And like work your way through. And then it's kind of like, once you get to the finals, you're not going to say anything to them because you want to beat them in the final.
Totally.
But like, it was like, there was a feeling between amongst a bunch of us where it was like, let's like keep showing like who we are as snowboarders and like present this in the best way possible. And
sick.
That was like not to let the FIS guys.
Like I remember feeling like the things that you'd have to do to be world champion in halfpipe was you legitimately had to be Shaun White, a little kid.
Totally.
That's done it their whole life.
Yeah.
And then Boardercross was kind of like, no, if you're really fast, you can probably win.
Yeah.
It felt like a little less technical to me personally.
Yeah.
Doing a bit of freestyle and then going to Boardercross.
Yeah.
Almost felt like retiring from the kids game and going into like going from checkers to chess or something. You know what I mean? Like, but also it didn't come with the celebrity. Yeah.
I mean, I think when Swatch and ISF died, it lost that part. It was still like the top tier of guys, like trying to go head to head with Xavier Delarue.
Right. It's
like,
legit. Dude.
It's legit. Like it was, like we went 3 world championships in a row. He won, I was second. I won, he won, I was second.
Yeah.
And it was like we had some unreal battles and like we're drinking buddies after and like super fun. And also like, yeah, like really damn hard because like snowboarding at that level. And he was also part of a crew of Europeans that pulled me into Big Mountain. Where it was like, let's go to Alaska for the first time.
Sick.
And
when was that?
2003. So that same year from
Big year.
Yeah. Like huge year, like life changing in a lot of ways because, like they, Mitch Todler, Flo Orley, Uli Kestenholtz and Zav, they all knew all these European filmers and stuff that I didn't, but I was hanging out in Europe a bunch at that point. My girlfriend at the time was Tanya Frieden, who ended up winning the gold in Torino as well.
Wow.
So I was hanging out in Switzerland for like 3 years.
Yeah.
We lived in Thun and like started going to Chamonix, like to go see Zav and like going to Innsbruck to see Mitch and Flo. And like Mitch and I were both on Atomic at the time. And then Zav actually like brought me on to Rosignol before the games. He was like, I want you to be my teammate. And
sick.
Like we worked on
those boards
together.
Are so sick. Hey,
yeah. Totally.
The boards ride the best of almost any board I've ever ridden.
They ride really good. And like,
they're insane.
Jeremy was still on them.
Yeah.
Like there was a window there where it was really cool. And like they were really supportive where like I didn't even have to negotiate. Like I got, it's like it showed up in my mailbox in Maine. It was like, here's the offer for you to ride only our snowboards.
Yes, like, we're cool with you. Just boards.
Yeah. And they're like, and we want to make you the fastest boards in the world so that you can win the Olympics in a year. Yeah,
that's the thing. They got a team of dozens of engineers working on that shit.
Well, and the 4 years that I like kind of helped Atomic get their program going, that was like the intro to that too, where they were like, oh yeah, like our World Cup ski racing team is the best in the world. This is why Herman Meyer skis for us, and we're going to give you his same base material so your boards are fastest.
God damn.
And so like there was a little like I had like 4 years of like going over to Altenmark to the factory there. And then basically like Rossi just offered me more money and they're like, we'll do the same thing. And it was like, all right, perfect.
Holy shit.
Yeah.
That's incredible.
So there was that window of time. And then they also were like, yeah, like we're supportive of, like you going to Alaska and like we'll pay for the photographers to go and stuff. So there was like,
is this post 2003? Is this?
Yeah. Like the first, so the first trip in 2004
is like everything, the bottom falls out of everything and people aren't getting paid anymore.
Well, and
you're signing this lucrative deal with Rossi.
Well, and like, because the Olympics were coming up all of a sudden, like through my agent in the States, it was like, here's Visa's going to pay you and Sprint Telephones is going to pay you.
Oh my God.
And like these non-endemic sponsors all of a sudden I'm like, wow, I'm making like $200 to $300 a year. Like I don't have to do anything else. I'm like buying property in Maine, starting a restaurant. You're just like sick. Like, and because the tour had shrunk, it was like, I've only got like 10 to 12 weekends of work this year.
So you were doing it every weekend from November till April for way less money.
And then all of a sudden, like the number of events started shrinking. I started having a bunch more money.
Jesus.
I'm like, May 1st, I'm going to Costa Rica and surfing for 30 days and like started doing stuff like that.
That's amazing.
Yeah, it was unreal. And then it was like, I'm going to go to Alaska and buy all the heli time I need to go film and do this other stuff. So,
and they're not giving you a contract where you're under pressure to produce stuff.
Yeah.
It's not like contingent on, because you hear about Jacoby back in, it's got to be 98 Olympics that he went to. He did something with Sprint or AT&T where he signed a contract that he only got paid if he made it to the Olympics.
Yeah. Well, and there was a bunch of that stuff, but not like, Sprint paid me a yearly salary and then you never had a phone bill anywhere in the world.
Friggin' believable.
And there was incentives for like every,
You get on TV.
You get on TV, whatever podiums you have, you know, and like those years were still pretty good where it was like most years I could get like 4, 5, 6 podiums out of a season.
Right.
So you're making, you know, probably 25 grand in prize money.
God damn.
Plus that was probably doubling with the incentives.
Of course.
Holy
shit.
And then the 2 Olympic years were like insane. And then there's other just random money coming at you those years where it's like Wheaties is like, if, you know, you sign a contract a year ahead of time, they decide that you're one of the ones that's in the running to get on a cereal box.
Yep.
And it's like, it's not even that it's that much money. I think it's like 25 grand if you get on the box, but it's whatever. It's 20.
But you're on the box too.
You're on the box, and it's 25 more grand that you didn't have before that week. So
So you had an agent. Did you have to get an accountant and do like a financial planner or something, or did you kind of do it yourself?
I kind of did it myself, which in retrospect was a huge mistake.
Sure.
But I didn't know any better. My parents were teachers, so they didn't know any better. Because
they're like
they were going to work for 45 years, get their pension, and retire on that, and they like live in one house their whole life, and so you know, there's a bunch of that stuff where it's like, oh, if you could only go back and tell your younger self, like,
flip that money, flip that money.
When my first friends were like, oh, I bought Apple stock in 1998. I'm like, what the hell's a stock? You know, like, and you're just like, oh my God, like
oh man,
I could have thrown chunks of money at things like that at a time when it would have been unbelievable.
Yeah, I'm going to be talking with Jamie Salter, who was one of the founding members of Ride, and I mean, he did the money thing. Yeah. But that was his goal, though. That was his life in snowboarding was, I'm going to make a lot of money.
Yeah. And that was never, honestly, I never gave a shit about money.
Right.
It was made things more comfortable at times, but like, it was never a driving force. It was just a little bit like, holy crap, I can't believe we get to do this. And people are giving us money for this. Because I would be doing this anyway.
I knew.
So there was that.
I knew that in my heart that's like, and that's basically how I select my guests is like, I want to talk to a snowboarder about snowboarding. Somebody who snowboarded because you pick it up and then you're like, well, I'm going to do this. And then if it works out, I'll do this as long as I can.
And because of people like Craig and Sean, I'm like, I'll just stay on World Cup forever because this is like so freaking easy. You know, like it's so easy. I'm getting to travel the world. I get to go to the Southern Hemisphere every summer. I have the whole rest of my year off. I can get all the free riding I need in 30 days in Alaska in April.
God damn.
Like, we get powder a lot of places we go.
Yeah.
You know, and I was still living in Maine, so the cost of living was nothing. It was like I was paying like $250 a month in rent.
Holy shit.
You know, so it's like
so rad.
It was rad. And like once I bought a bunch of land one summer and just lived in a tent for 6 months until I needed to leave for tour again. And it's like, sweet, put everything in my storage unit, I'm out of here.
That's insane.
And
dude, that's so rad.
Yeah.
So like where I first bumped into you in real life, you were supposed, so I got into the Baker Bank slalom. I was like the first guy in the lottery. They called my name. People were like, dude, you got in the lottery. Rad. I was so stoked.
Lottery is so, I have friends from Maine who've been put in for 20 years and never gotten in. You know?
I think like, this was finally the year where they're like, you can say it's been 8 years because like that's the max number of years that they'll let you say. I'd lost count of how many years it had been. It had to be like 8 or 10 years or something. You know what I mean? That I'd put in, and then I got it. I was so psyched. And then when I was looking at the results, you know, I didn't do that great, but I didn't get last. That was like my goal was, well, my goal was to win, but our category, which I consider you a part of, which is Pro Men's Masters. With you winning Pro Men's. And then the first 2 guys of Pro Men's Masters were faster than the second guy in Pro Men's. It's like the Masters are the fastest.
Totally.
Like, obviously.
Well, and like a few years ago, and it was funny because like, you know, clearly Terrier was a hero. And I'd been in a lot of situations where you're like in, you know, proximity, but then you're also like a little bit from the early years so starstruck that you're like, I don't even know what to say to the guy. And like, you know, I always was like, oh man, like, you know, because the first year I ever got to go to Baker was 96. And then I didn't get to go back for like a long time, like 2003, I think.
Wow.
Which again, another part of that year. So Terrier wins in 96.
Yep.
I'm like a kid, you know, like I wasn't a kid, you know, whatever. I was in college that year. That was like that year.
Yeah.
But I was like so out of my element of like, I remember it was puking on finals day, and my goggles sucked. I couldn't see where I was going. I was like so lost.
Yes.
And I feel like it actually just snowed that whole week. So
that makes sense.
I remember like never actually seeing the course other than the moments you're in there. And it's like the way that it can be so disorienting.
Oh yeah.
Because, you know, and if you've never ridden like that natural half pipe before, like you have no idea of the intricacies of it.
Yeah.
And I just remember like, I didn't do horrible. I think I was 16th in Pro Men.
That's good.
Which was fine for like 1996. I was like, I'll take that. And, but then when I came back in 03, I got second behind Terrier.
Nice.
He won again.
God damn.
And so it was like, oh yeah, like now I'm back and I can like race at this thing. And I like got to see it on a sunny day.
You got duct tape.
Yeah. I got my first duct tape, got my first blanket. And, but you know, I still like, I so regret how many years I missed, like not even before then, but like the after then till now, you know, like, you know, sometimes the US team would be like, dude, like you really should be in Europe on that week. And, and like some years I would skip out on whatever the other event was. And some years I would go, and I should have skipped every event every year for that thing because it like, to me, it means more than anything. And it's like that camaraderie of it. And then there's all the funny stuff of like, you know, like, being in the lodge and like Sipnewski being like, dude, like you got to stay in Pro Men for a while. And I'm like, don't worry. Like I am intending to probably stay in Pro Men at least until I'm 50.
I love these conversations. They're amazing.
You know, cause they're like, we can't have you. Like they got all pissed the year that Kinger moved up to Pro Masters and he won it the first year. And,
yeah, man.
And then like, but then like there's like the next generation, you know, like Curtis from Bend a couple years ago is like, dude, isn't it about time you get out of Pro Men and move up to Pro? I'm like, no, dude, I'm like still trying to win this thing as many times as I can.
Hell yeah.
And yeah, like, and there's just, you know, it's like you have years where your runs go well and years where it doesn't. And, but I've been on a good run there for a while. And like, it is a funny thing because now, like a few years back, Terrier was like, hey man, do you have a scraper? And, you know, and like comes up and I'm like, just give me your board, dude. Like, and I like scrape it all out, brush it all out. And it was like, that was like kind of the pivotal moment of like now, you know, he's like, hey man, how's it going? Every time I see him and stuff.
He's really sweet.
I
had the same thing with him that, I don't know. I don't know what it was. Maybe I'll ask him. But it was kind of like, sure, you can tag along and maybe we'll do an interview or whatever. But you got to come ride with us. Like you got to show that you can hang. I'm not just going to get interviewed by some kook or whatever. And then watching him out in the world, he's actually really nice.
Oh,
like
totally.
He's like nice to the people he's with. He's nice to the general public. But then there's like a jokiness that he has that like at first you're like, shit, I think, is he really making fun of me or something?
Yeah, totally. Or like,
why
does he hate me?
Yeah,
you know?
why does he hate me?
What's
Exactly.
going on?
But really, he's just, you know, he keeps people at a bit of arm's length, and then when you can rib back with him, you're good. I think.
I think so too. But so there's this funny thing like with that, because like the last few years it's been really cool, and I've actually been helping him out, like teching for him a little bit. And, because I'm just like, whatever, like I want him to ride his best there too, because
the
like
best he can.
It means a lot to me to be competing with him still.
Yeah.
Monday morning, like I'll get a text from my mom and she's like, "Oh, you beat Terrier."
That's great.
And it's like the only, like, it doesn't matter if I got fourth or I won, or it's like the only thing she ever says. I think it's like a 7-year stretch, you know, like except for the year was off last year. And she's always like, "Oh, that's sweet, honey. You beat Terrier," you know, because she would have like seen me watching his video parts, like
totally,
you know, the Valley Nevada part from Critical Condition, like over and over and over on the TV screen at home. And
it's so,
and I would have been like, "Oh, this is the best snowboarder in the world, Mom." Like,
yes,
you know,
it's so crazy that he was so far and ahead at that time.
Yeah, totally.
Did you compete against him in half pipe when when he was just crushing, when he was unbeatable?
Like, my second U.S. Open, I remember he wasn't at the first one for some reason in '94, which is weird. Like, I don't know, because he should have been. He was at 93. I don't like.
Yep.
Maybe he was banged up that spring or something. I don't know.
Yeah, possibly hurt. Right.
But I remember, like, because I hadn't ridden pipe that year, like I don't even know if like the USASA gave me a spot in, or like I got a spot somehow. Yeah. And come home from college to like ride, and that was like, I remember distinctly that year he was like doing these back-to-back alley-oops, but like they were like his like third and fourth hits in the pipe, and they were bigger than anyone else's straight airs. Yeah. And it was like, to me, that was, I had lots of cognitive moments of like understanding that like your use of edges is like maybe the most important thing in snowboarding, because of like watching Mark Fawcett and watching Jeremy Jones experiment with turning alpine boards in the earliest years of that when I was a kid. But then seeing him translate it into the half pipe, and it was like, that's where all his speed is coming from. Yeah, he's just so much better at edging than everyone else. Totally. And so that led into that next year when I did my post-grad year and started doing pipe full time. And it was like seared into my head that it was like, especially because I was riding an icy half pipe all the time, it's like, if I can ride well in this icy half pipe at home when I'm training, I can go everywhere else and be pretty proficient at a high level. Hell yeah. 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 And so a lot of years, like the only time you'd ride against him was at the US Open. Yeah. Cause that was kind of like, you know, he had probably gone hard through like the 96, 97 winter. And then kind of started, like the superstar events started happening, Innsbruck Air and Style, things like that. And like he started stepping into this other realm where it was like, yeah, even at ISF, like he wasn't at Locks for the ISF halfpipe, like in the season opener and like things like that, where you like, you'd kind of been hoping all these years. You're like, I'm finally going to get there. And like, you know, and you're like, fuck, he's not here. Like, oh man. Yeah. Yeah. So did you do big air and style as well? Yeah, not air and style, but I mean, I did a bunch of big airs over the years. And yeah. Slope style, everything. Like competed everything. Well, that was Craig's model. Like being the, you know, I came from that time where it was like whoever was the overall world champion was the best rider in the world. That's incredible. And so there was like a belief instilled. I totally hear you. Yeah, totally. Yeah. As a competitor, it's like you got to be good at all things. Did you ever do GS and Super G and all that stuff? Oh, totally. Yeah. Holy crap. Like I never really put much of an effort into it. And actually it's funny because like the best result I ever had was after taking a complete year off from it. Like I borrowed a setup for national championships and got second in GS behind Ian Price. No way. Yeah. And I don't know if that was one of the years that Ian won the U.S. Open, but I got second to him in national championships in GS. Unbelievable. On a borrowed Burton setup, like borrowed boots, borrowed the whole deal. No. And then that same week at nationals, like Chad Otterstrom won slopestyle. I got second to Chad in slopestyle. Damn. I don't know. I was like sixth or something in pipe. I had a shitty pipe week that week, and still sixth. It wasn't. It was fine. Yeah. But like, But it was like so funny to like. Same week, be on the podium for slopestyle and be on the podium for GS. That's nuts. Yeah. That's right. And, you know, to that point, it's like, it was the same thing with like, say at that World Championships, I believe, I mean, I know as far as a US rider, but I was definitely the last one, like say, to be in finals in a racing discipline and a freestyle discipline at that world championship level in the same week.
None of the racers could ride half pipe
at that level.
Not at a world champ level or at finals level even.
Totally.
Holy shit.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's cool.
Yeah.
It's cool that you had that just in you from probably, going to school or like.
Oh yeah. Well, but I mean, it's like that was in me from like, Mark and Jeremy's influence early, but also like, like watching Chill with Craig Kelly, and he's like training Gates
he's
on
talking about
Palmer
being the
Hood. Yeah.
Yeah. Talking about being the world overall world champ was like such a big deal.
Yeah.
There was people that just didn't buy into that, like Brushie
totally.
Like early on that were just
yeah.
like, no, fuck, I'm not doing the racing thing.
Yeah.
There's something.
But that CVA had that influence where it was like, if you're going to be a good snowboarder, you do need to be able to do everything.
That's cool.
And that was instilled in me.
That's it. Yeah. Talking to Ross last year, Ross Rebliati.
Yep.
Try and say it right. Yeah. Seeing him light up when he talks about going fast.
Yeah.
Like, of course, it's so fun to ride fast at your local resort. Like, it's be the fastest people on the hill, and people going, "Wow, you guys are going really fast." But like at a super G level, he was talking about it, and I was like, "Fuck, that's some next level shit." That's
it was
really
gnarly. I only did a few professional super Gs. Like, I remember the first one I did was at Kirkwood, and again, like I didn't really have the full setup then, so it was like I was on a 185 borrowed board, and it was against Fawcett and all those guys. It dropped straight in off this cornice at the top of this bowl at Kirkwood, and I was like, I haven't really been riding hard boots in a long time. This is fucking gnarly. Like,
Fawcett crushed for those years.
Yeah.
There was no racing world champ like Fawcett.
Yeah,
he was so good.
So good.
The Olympics where I watched it live at Earl's, like at the restaurant, and I was like, "Oh god damn!" And then Ross wins it, and you're like, "We should have had first, second."
Right, totally,
like 100%.
Oh yeah,
like there was no reason for Mark to get anything but first.
Binding malfunction. Yeah.
It was, he had been on that board beyond the life of the board. That's what had happened.
Totally.
But it was his lucky board. It was his board.
And it's not even just a lucky one, it's a fast one. It's like if that one has 200 more coats of wax through it, it's more marinated. You know? I mean, we literally I had one board that I won the Worlds and the Olympics on.
Wow.
Another board, like once I had moved over to Kessler to race on their stuff, that won the Olympics and like 3 World Cups on, and like there's just ones where, like, for whatever reason, that 2 meters of PTEX is better than any of the other PTEX in that 100-meter roll.
Tell me about this waxing thing. Like, what amount does waxing up your game for? Let's keep it to the bank slalom.
Yeah, totally.
How much? Could you win on just some random board that you grab from somewhere and put a coat of wax on it? You got a good wax recipe, and you
could. I mean,
you personally. Like,
I mean, I've worked now for a few years to like just dial in my board shape for Baker, where
just
I'm kind of like, I'm like, I know that like they're gonna set it tight or open, so I kind of have like 2 different radiuses that work for the 2 versions. And like I have done way less, like, because it's like making my own boards at Winterstick, and compared to like what went into, like, say the Vancouver Olympics, where Hans-Jürg Kessler at his own factory in Switzerland makes me 25 boards. We go places, we glide test them in all different snow conditions with my wax tech. Like, that stuff was really dialed in. And this was kind of like, well, I made one 164 and one 160 this year, and these are my 2 boards for Baker. And there's no testing. There's like, I put the right temperature wax on for the day, but it's way different than it was.
So do you think that stuff makes that huge of a difference?
It does. Yeah.
Because those margins are
so tight. And like I am super stoked. I've ridden the same board for the last 3 Bakers. I'll probably ride it again this year. Like, I just kind of made a good one.
Let's talk about winter stick. When do you first get involved with these guys? Is there a point where sponsorship kind of dries up?
Yeah.
And contracts just like...
Totally. Well, I mean, a lot of stuff started with the financial crisis in 2008.
2008.
The Olympic years were super good for me all the way through 2010 because there was money coming from outside of the sport.
Got it.
I had a 5-year run on Nike where I got a monthly paycheck from Nike.
God. You were on that dream team with all those Nike
just
riders?
To be training and that was like, I kept a couple of those pay stubs because it's like, it's kind of cool that like Nike is like, you're an athlete and we're going to pay you to just prepare yourself.
That's nuts.
So I did outerwear for them for 5 years.
The ACG stuff? Is that what it's called?
It was like, that was in there for a little bit and then...
Oh yeah, they kept
Nike
going
stuff.
Through
cycles,
right.
So it was like, especially with their involvement in snowboarding, and I never did the boots. Right. The boots were kind of coming in again, but maybe like right after I got done with them.
It was just outerwear. It was
just outerwear.
Their stuff was nice.
Oh yeah,
no,
it was all Gore-Tex.
Pieces.
It was great. Yeah. It was like, they like right before. I met with Curtis Graham, the team manager here in 2005. Like he came up to me after winning the world championships and he's like, I'd like you to be on Nike for outerwear.
Sounds good.
All right. Talk to my agent, see how much money it is.
Yeah. Who were you on at the time? Did you have to leave North Face or some?
No, I think I was actually just between stuff right then.
How
so
lucky.
It was kind of like,
that's dope.
Cool timing. And then like
that Nike money, goddamn.
Oh, it was sick. And it was just cool. Like, if you were in Manhattan for the week, they're like, oh, you should just go by the flagship store and get whatever you want. I had a big shoe collection for like 5 years.
Yeah. That stuff is nuts.
Just stuff that like, you'd never, I don't know. I never would have paid money to have a shoe collection, but it was like pretty cool when they just give you all that stuff. And
yeah. They have access to way like that next level up.
Yeah.
Well, Burton's got access, like you say.
Totally.
They're renting 2 floors of a hotel in Europe and stuff. So being on these, epic teams.
Yeah.
Like
it was cool.
You were spoiled.
I was definitely spoiled for sure.
That's so sick. So when does the
winter
stick thing?
Winter stick came about. There's like a couple things that happened. Like when the Quicksilver buyout happened with Rossi.
Oh yeah.
And that was like they downsized everything that was going on with Rossi.
Rossi had worked so hard to take it from that Euro to like a US centric kind of like very cool team.
And even the freeride team, like with me and the Euros, like all those guys were on Freeride World Tour.
Yep.
I probably, had I stayed with them, I probably would have started doing Freeride World Tour events because that was kind of like that next winter, like the winter after the Olympics. It could have been like, let's refocus for a couple years and then I can like tune back up 2 years before Vancouver.
Totally.
And that was kind of my intention. And then it just didn't happen because like they started losing money kind of as soon as the Quicksilver thing happened.
Yeah.
And in retrospect, it's like, I don't know if the administration there saw the writing on the wall and knew that this would happen, but like the French owners like did an amazing business job of like, they sold at a high point to Quicksilver.
Right.
They bought it back like 5 years later for like 10% of what they sold it for. So the same ownership group comes back in.
Right.
They pocketed $50 million.
Right. And had a 5-year vacation.
And they were like, okay, we're energized. Let's go back and run this again.
Yeah.
So they did that. And I lost out on that timing because it was like one of those weird things. Like Jeremy left to go to Start Jones.
Yep.
They keep Zav because it's French centric.
Totally.
And, I was like, I never thought I'd get a contract cut for winning the Olympics, but that happened. And
that's insane.
It's another insane one.
So you win the Olympics that year and your contract ends.
Like at the end of that year.
Yeah. And they're like,
I think I had one more year. Like it might have run through 2007.
Okay.
or maybe it even ran into '08 and all the financial crisis. Some of that timing stuff like gets a little lost, but at the time there was like this huge shift in the board making as far as the race boards, where we were going from like just riding a free ride board, like we were riding Delarose Pro Model with special race bases.
Yeah.
And then like I got, I had an injury, and I would always have like peaks and valleys with injuries, like, have blown both knees.
Oh God.
Broke my back.
Jeez.
I've got 13 screws in a plate in this wrist. And then I ripped this pec off my humerus in a crash in Switzerland. So they're like about a year, it was a year and a day after winning. I am winning the final of a World Cup in Furano, Japan.
Mm-hmm.
Huge lead. Like, had just like been crushing my heats all day. 200 meters to go to the final kicker. There's like, how it, like this stuff warms up so much in Japan because it's so far south.
Yeah, dude.
So the takeoff of this kicker, someone in a heat before had like hooked an edge. There's a huge rut.
Yeah.
They're out there salting stuff. It didn't get raked.
They salted a rut.
I catch a heel side edge on it on the takeoff of this thing.
Full speed,
overshoot the landing, land to a heel side edge catch, hit my head, slap my wrist. It explodes my wrist. The full bend in the arm and like
gross. Yeah. Man.
And so that this is like, and that whole year, like, so I'd gone a year and a day. I'd podiumed every single event I'd done from the Olympics through the year,
Jeez.
which was the best run of my career. Like, 365 days, every event I did, I was on the podium. And then shatter my arm in Japan in winning the World Cup. Like, it wasn't a close race. I had a huge lead. Fly back to the States, have my arm rebuilt. I was leading. There was like a Jeep King of the Mountain tour. I'd won the first 2 stops. So I was like leading that tour to win a Jeep, a bunch of money.
Yeah.
The next race was the week after, couldn't race. Actually had a whole thing set up with North Face to join North Face. And in getting surgery in Vail, like I was originally like, maybe I'll just go to Telluride to watch the final event and like talk on TV or whatever. And then it was like a little gnarlier than I thought. Cause like I traveled back from Japan to surgery in Vail on my own, like it ended up being like a 3-day frigging nightmare travel scenario with a shattered arm. They couldn't set it in Japan. It was in so many pieces. So I went no painkillers. This Japanese doctor tried for like an hour and 45 minutes to set my arm.
No.
And
that's such a nightmare.
We had a team doctor that was with us. They wouldn't let him do anything in the hospital there.
Right.
So this guy's just like massaging my bones, trying to get them into place for like an hour and 45 minutes. I'm fully in shock.
Yeah. Do you feel like he knew what he was doing? Had he done this kind of thing before?
Yeah, maybe, but like
it just wasn't.
Who knows?
Working.
There's no English being spoken, no communication.
Right.
I go back to the hotel that night, like, this had been a long day at that point, and so they just like they didn't even cast it because like they knew it was going to swell like crazy. So I had like just basically like an ace bandage wrapped on this thing.
Oh God.
And I'm like, well, I don't want to wake up tonight. So I like World Cup parties going on. I go in, drink heavily for like 2 hours. I'm like, I'm going to bed. That night turns out to be like a crazy World Cup party, like people, fire extinguishers in the hotel. Fire alarm goes off. I sleep through the whole thing. Like I wake up in the morning and everyone's like, that was insane last night. I'm like, what? They're like, the whole hotel was evacuated. I'm like, I was passed out in my bed. Like, cause I didn't I get back from the hotel and that was the first time that like our team could be like, here's painkillers. So I'm like, go down, pound 6 beers or something and go to bed and then sleep through a hotel evacuation.
Holy
Thankfully
God.
It wasn't a fire, but
yeah. And then straight onto a plane.
Ugh. So I could only get as far as San Fran the first night because it was all changed tickets. Could only get from San Fran to Reno the second night, and then Reno into Denver the third night. And like by the time I get there, like if I'm holding my fingers as far apart as I can, they're all touching.
You're just swollen up like insane.
Swollen, everything's black and blue.
And your
my radius is shattered.
God, gross.
So that was a bit of a nightmare. So I have the surgery. My buddy Tom Hackett, who's my doctor, who now I've like gone on surf trips all over the world with, and like
rad, is
a really good friend. He was at my wedding. You know, he's like, okay, there's a plan A and a plan B. He's like, if you wake up and there's no metal on the outside, then plan A worked. It's like, if you wake up and there's metal on the outside, then we had to go with plan B. You know, I was like, all right, see you after the things, Tom, you know, and it's like getting the knockout already. And
yeah.
And so wake up and it was plan A, thankfully.
Oh, cool. Cool.
But so then it was a funny thing. Like I just decide, I'm like, well, I'm too friggin' hurt. And at this point, like after those 3 nightmare days of travel, I kind of like, I stay at Tom's house, give it like 48 more hours before getting on a plane, fly back to the East Coast. I miss this meeting with the team manager for North Face in Telluride that I had set up before all this stuff happened.
Right.
It's totally out of mind because of all that had transpired that week.
It, like missed it without calling and saying like, hey, sir.
Yeah, I did. It like totally
just spaced it.
Forgot that was something that was going to happen.
Yeah.
And so then like, you know, it's like 7 weeks later, I go to Alaska, go film all this metal in my arm. And like have a pretty good filming season. Like I basically just didn't ride for 7 weeks, let this get solid.
Yeah, going to Alaska.
I'm wearing North Face stuff for filming.
Sick.
And then like I kind of like call to check in and they're like, well, dude, we never heard from you. And we have a company policy. Like if you're bad at communication the first time, like you don't get a second chance.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
I'm
I could see that. What a bummer though.
Yeah.
Like North Face is
just weird
sick.
change of, chain of events. And and that would have been awesome because
continuation.
Yeah. Nike was done at that time. It would have been like
North Face.
Zav had just signed with him. So it's like, could have done trips with him.
Oh, wow.
You know, it was just such a weird, I was like, fuck.
Just a bummer. Yeah. Just a bummer. Yeah. Cause North Face is they've had people on there for 30 years.
Totally. And I was like, finally, I'm going to like, this is like the dream scenario from now until whenever.
I was looking at an ISM magazine the other day.
Oh yeah.
That had to be from 88 or something.
Yeah.
And
it's
they
like
had
John Greiber and, you know, like.
Yeah, they had a North Face ad in there. I was like, are you serious?
Yeah.
I kind of missed it because I always thought North Face
I
was
did too, but
sort of like ski related or something.
Because of Schmidt, you know? Like,
Scott Schmidt is still the man.
The poster boy. Yeah.
North Face, he's the dude.
Yeah.
But slowly over the last, I'd say 5 years for me especially.
Yeah.
I'm like, North Face is super legit.
Oh, and this stuff's
They've
awesome.
always made amazing shit.
Well, my wife was an athlete for them for a bunch of years. So it was like when we first actually started dating, like she would come to Montreal for meetings at their Canadian headquarters and I would drive up to Montreal from Maine to go have a date. So
sick.
It was a funny connection, but
yeah, that's super dope.
Yeah.
Okay. We gotta hit the winter stick thing.
Yeah. So this is where I was going with all that somehow in a roundabout way. So I switched to Kessler. Like I have this moment at World Cup finals. The year after that arm break, I kind of just have a shitty year. Like
I could see it.
No good results. Confidence is down.
It's a big injury.
Yeah, and like I'd never even broken a bone. You know, like I'd gone through a blown knee, but like the blown knee was like whatever. Like, you know, that time it was like a year later, I win gold and silver at X Games in 1 week. So I'm like, sweet, you know, it's all good. And so I start this whole process of like World Cup finals was done. One of the team wax techs at the time were like, they had like World Cup finals was in Quebec. They actually like just took like a floor of a parking garage and that was like where the wax room setup was. And I like smoke a joint after it's like drug testing's done for the year.
Yeah.
And I just start like wandering around, this wax room, and I'm like looking at all these people's boards that it's like Oxus out of Switzerland, there was like maybe the first few Apexes, tons of Kesslers. And I was kind of like, like something is shifting, And so I reach out to Hans-Jörg Kessler and I was like, hey, I'd like to come over to Switzerland and meet you and see what it's all about. So I, like a few weeks later, just fly over there in the spring, take the train over to Brunwald, like, cause I was so comfy with traveling there.
Rad.
I go stay a couple nights and, I'm like, yeah, I think this is the thing to do. And, so, he builds me some boards. I don't really put any input into it yet, but because all he did was race boards, it was kind of like an opportunity to start doing something else with freestyle or freeride boards. So I had a friend in Maine who was starting a custom snowboard company at the time. It was called Team 8. And so I went to him, and his whole thing was like, he's like, yeah, I'm going to make like 150 boards a year. Each one's going to be completely custom, kind of like being a surf shaper. Like the customer is going to come to me. I've set up a building process that I don't need molds for, so I can do it completely custom.
Damn.
So I'm like, all right, like I want to build a couple powder shapes that I've wanted. So I do that with him that summer, start riding them the next winter, kind of like fall in love with them. Actually the first race I go to do is in Chapelco in Argentina, like in August. So that's going to be the first race on a Kessler. I'm like pretty fired up with like how they're working. And I'm like, okay, like I want to like just make a statement right here. Cause I can tell that this is better than like, I was on 4-year-old Rosie's prior to that.
Right.
And it was like, okay, like it was time for a change, like through training and stuff. And I'm like, I'm going to win this friggin' time trial just to like lay one down on the first run on a Kessler on a clock. I end up overshooting the finish jump so badly, and I'm in the back seat and just land like mid-thoracic spine.
Ugh.
And don't realize it at the time, and just being like stupid guy being like, it hurts, but it's not that bad, and it's like, I know that there's nothing else until December with the team at that point. So I go home, can't really sleep for like 3 months.
Oh shit.
But slowly heal.
You feel it getting better. Yeah.
Yeah. I feel it getting better.
Yeah.
By December, like now I'm in this situation where, because of the broken arm the year before, I've actually lost team status, because it's like the first time ever for the U.S. team that I didn't meet my A-team criteria.
Got it.
So now...
Did you win that race where you hurt your back?
No. I couldn't even race. Like...
Yeah, you were hurt. That was time trials.
Yeah, right, it was time trials.
Yeah.
So I end up not racing. Like I made it through.
Yeah.
Like being at a dead stop in the finish line.
Yep.
Getting up and like on a flat surface, creeping across the finish line like 30 yards later. I still qualify through, but I'm like, the next day I'm like,
I can't race.
Something's really wrong.
Yeah.
So I go home, I just kind of like walk it off. It slowly heals through the fall. I've lost my team status now. So I am having to pay for the first time. This
is your first time paying since you were a kid, even.
Yeah. Like since I first started getting a travel budget from Burton.
Oh my God.
And I'm kind of like, I'm the reigning Olympic champion at this point. I'm like,
yeah.
If Lindsey Vonn hurt herself, like, is she really going to have to pay to like go to the next World Cup? Because she had 2 back-to-back injuries and didn't meet criteria in a year. And so like I call up the wax tech that had teched for me for the Olympics in Torino. Like that was the only time we'd worked together. Otherwise I'd used US team technicians. We win the Olympics together. 2 years later, I'm like, hey, Curtis, like, dude, I need you to go to Switzerland with me. And I'll buy you a plane ticket. He's in Sun Valley. He has his tuning shop there. I'm like, I'll buy you a plane ticket. Like, we got to go in like 48 hours.
Oh, wow.
We fly to we fly to Zurich, go up to Arosa. So this is now becomes the first World Cup I've actually ridden a Kessler on.
Yeah.
Win the World Cup.
Nice.
And like, so like this is happening and it's like validation of like, okay, like I made the right decision, you know, a year ago to switch over to these race boards. They're fast. I now need to change my shapes.
Yeah.
You know, is like what he had were way too big. I wanted to like take a Kessler and kind of make it more free ridey and smaller. So I do that over the next year and that like sets me up for Vancouver. But in this time, I start this board experimentation of making powder shapes with my buddy Greg. And so that goes on for a few years. And then Greg kind of goes through like life change of getting married, starting a family, having his first kid. And he's like, okay, like I can't only make 150 custom snowboards a year. I need to do something else.
Right.
I'm like, well, hey, I'll buy all your manufacturing equipment and I don't have something to do with it yet, but I know I want to like do something with this later.
Sick.
And so it just goes in a storage unit up at home. And
but it's not presses. He's doing
no, it's a press. It's a CNC. It's just a different. It's a different type of like. He's not making an aluminum mold for every shape.
Got it.
And so the winter stick guys, this spans some years past Vancouver. Like in the spring of 2014, like at some point that year, like the two main owners are both from Maine. I've known them forever because they were an older generation from CVA.
Oh, rad.
So there's a connection. And I can't remember if they approached me or I approached them, but it was kind of like, okay, like I think this could be cool timing to like shift. And because I've been doing board shaping for a section of years now between Kessler and doing stuff with Greg, I'm like, okay, it's time to like make a shift and I could help you guys kind of reinvent winter stick.
Yeah.
And it's time for you guys, like, someone else has been manufacturing them for you. I can work with that guy, see if it works. So they were getting built out of the Wagner Custom Ski Factory in Telluride. So I'd fly out that spring, spend like 4 days with Pete Wagner. And I'm like, okay, like these are the changes we're going to make. I redesign all of it. We do like our first order that year. It all ships out of my garage in Maine.
Oh, that's so rad. You did orders at...
we had Wagner build the boards for us.
But like you took orders at like an SIA thing or something? You go up to...
They were just kind of...
Or did you send reps out?
No, nothing like that. We just were like, okay, we're going to build... And I forget what the number was. Because it was basically like... They had gone through ups and downs with it too.
Absolutely.
And their final... Like they had kind of built it up to where they were selling like from where they got it in 99, they built it up to selling like 4,000 boards a year again.
That's pretty good.
Which is pretty good.
That's really good, actually.
They got Tom Bird on, like they'd kind of like put some things in place. And I think this happened to them in 06. They take all their pre-order money. They're being manufactured up in Chicoutimi, Quebec. They Focus Manufacturing, I believe. They give them $1.5 million
up front. Yeah.
And those guys close the door.
Oh.
And are like, yeah, try to come sue us in Canada.
No.
Take their cash. So my two partners go back with family money, pay back all the retailers.
Oh my God.
That had given them the money so that the brand would be in good standing.
Right.
It wouldn't fuck up the name.
Yeah.
That was when they found Pete Wagner, and Pete was willing to be like, I'll just do it as like a licensing thing. If an order comes through your website, I'll fill the order. Cool. But we're not going to build stock.
Yeah.
So the first year that I come on was like the first year of like, we're going to build 80 boards up front and just see if we can sell 80 snowboards.
Sure.
Because there's been like a dozen swallowtails sold every year since 2006, but like,
right.
There's been no other, and like Tom Burt's sold 10 of his boards every year, but like there's been no other marketing, no energy behind this. And so we just kind of started. That was our starting point. And the next year we did one more year with Wagner. But it was hard because he had a custom ski making business and we were not his priority.
Yeah, it'd be like using Pryor or someone.
Totally.
Yeah.
And we all got that. And it was kind of like, okay, you know, like we made some more changes. The boards are really good. And
yeah, the board that Tom's on, I always look at it every year. I'm like, you're still riding that board.
Oh, he totally. He's so funny too. Like, you know, I'm like, Tom, you know, you could have your signature model.
Yep.
Like you can ride whatever you want and we could make a signature model in a bunch of different sizes and sell a bunch of them for you so you get some revenue.
Totally.
And he's like, no, man, I only like the 173. He's like, I'll ride your board for everything else. It's like, yeah, but then why don't we just put your graphic on
that
a smaller board?
Yeah,
and
man.
if that's what you're riding in the lift line at Squaw, like
I rode with him on Ice Age in the early 90s.
Yeah.
And his boards were weird for back then.
Yeah,
you know what I mean? Like it was like they looked like they were a throwback to an old time.
Totally.
But I rode one when we were down in Utah, and I was like, this shit fucking rips in powder.
Oh yeah,
like taper.
Yeah,
long, nice nose.
Well, now that was a bit of
the first, before I committed to it that first year, year I was like, well, I'll take a Swallowtail and I'll take one of TB's boards for my Alaska trip this spring.
Cool.
I'm going to ride TB's board, see what I think about it.
Yeah.
I went up, was like, I can go so friggin' fast up here on this thing.
It's a machine.
Yeah. I was like, this is amazing. I was like, yeah. So that was kind of like the tipping point of like, okay,
that's sick.
Let's do it. It's time to like start something over and, you know, put the effort and the energy into it. And
it's got such a heritage. It's the longest.
The heritage
running.
This is our
snowboard name.
50th anniversary this winter.
That's fucked up.
It's like it predates Burton by 5 years.
Yeah. And when you see Dimitri footage from the early 70s, 71, 72, I think it is.
Yeah.
Is that right?
72 was the year he founded, but he was like riding some other...
He was riding before that, his homemade boards.
Totally.
And legitimately ripping.
Oh, yeah.
Like
ripping powder.
Ripping powder, hitting cliffs.
Yeah.
Like, what the fuck? That guy was so ahead of it.
Well, and he has a quote where he's like, sometimes it's better to be too late to a trend than too early.
Yeah.
And like...
Yeah.
There's a whole group of winter stickers that I have met that were like old Utah guys.
Yeah.
And, you know, when we kind of decided to relaunch this thing, I went out when Summer OR was going on and set up a meeting with a bunch of these guys.
Rad.
And because they were going to be our first demo center at Powder Mountain, where like a lot of them started.
Very cool.
And so I'm doing my own trade show stuff, and then I've got this lunch meeting. I didn't know any of these guys before walking in. One of them is very successful businessman, so like they're like, give me this address to meet him at, and it's like on a 20th floor boardroom meeting in a downtown Salt Lake business building. Yeah. And they're like, yeah, like if you're into this, like we're passionate about this and we will help get this going again.
Sick.
So that was great. Like kind of like meeting those guys and hearing the stories and then being like, oh, the first time Jake showed up in Little Cottonwood Canyon, like we heckled him. Like he was still holding on to a rope. Yeah. And they're like, every run he would take, we would just be like, drop the rope, Jake, drop the rope. And like, so that like getting to meet these guys who were all skate rats who had hung around Dimitri's shop in Salt Lake as teenagers and gotten addicted to riding powder. And like, to me, that was where it was like, at this point in my career, that's all I want to do.
I'm surprised you didn't do Wescott boards. That's what I'm thinking here while you're talking about this. Like, is it just, there's a certain type of person, like
I wasn't
like
into
Chris Pryor or even Jake.
Yeah, or Jeremy.
Tom, or Jeremy that are going to put their name on a board.
Yeah.
You had a career that would support that, but you're just not that guy.
I wasn't that guy.
Yeah.
I didn't want to go that route. Like I was comfortable with creating my own pro model for a brand that I was now a part owner of.
Cool.
But like to me, the big part of it was this legacy of this brand and the legacy of a brand that is all about riding powder. There was nothing better I could do. I couldn't trump that, it's like, that's as good as it gets. And I wanted to just like that whole ideal of like snow surfing, and like meeting these guys and being like, yeah, like that's what we dubbed it as, and like the first time that I went to Taro Tamai's place, in Niseko, and seeing like the top of his rack of the things that influenced him for Gentum Stick was like the winter sticks. Yeah. And
I've always wondered what how did they do the dots? My guess is that they.
Oh, it's just a die cut.
Like the dots that,
on
like
his base?
No, on the top sheets of the really old ones.
Yeah.
I think they look like drips. Like I think they epoxied it and then they flipped it.
It's not. It's a mold, and I've seen the mold.
Oh, you've seen the mold,
and it's like there is a cavity in every one of those. So that was all designed.
Yeah.
One of the trippiest things, and like I love some of the stuff, and this is why, like, I've had some email communication, but I would love to sit with him, or like I would really love to sit with Don Moss, who is his graphic designer.
Yep.
There is. When you look at one of those and you actually see it in the light, and I have a few of them, they're back home in Maine. Like as soon as COVID's like travelable, I'm hoping to go back there in September, and I want to bring some back. But it's actually amazing because they had this old oval logo, that was kind of this like energy orb thing, and the actual bumps are repeating that geometric shape down the boards. And so when you look at a real one in the light, like you're like, oh, that's actually their logo.
Oh, wow.
In concentric circles.
No way.
Coming down the board. And so like the geometry of that was like, when I had that moment of like, oh, that's actually what that is. It was like amazing to see it for the first time, rather than just like looking sideways at the board and being like, oh, it's just covered in bumps. Like,
I was looking at the bumps from the point of view like, how did they do that?
Yeah,
because Scott Surface has one.
Yeah, go look at his, and
I was
you'll
flexing
see this,
and he's like, don't flex it, don't break it. It's like $1 billion board. I was like, that's the thing, that it inspires this curiosity. That you're like, this is not just like a toy. Like when you see a snurfer, it's a toy.
Yeah, it's a toy.
It's a toy. But when you see
but Dimitri was the first person to make a modern snowboard,
legitimate modern snowboard,
and especially for the purpose of riding powder. And
100%.
I think ultimately what really happened with the first downturns of Winter Stick was like he couldn't conceptualize, because like he's giving him to Regis Roland, and Regis is riding him in France and shredding at Les Arcs and
shredding.
And it's like, why would you build a snowboard for hardpack? And that's where
right.
Jake and Tom were working on the ski resort acceptance and seeing a different business model. Dimitri was so influenced by that soulful experience of going out and hiking in Little Cottonwood Canyon or in other parts of Utah and riding fresh powder.
I think he says it in episode 1 when I talked to him on the phone.
I'm sure he does.
I think he says that there are days for skiing and there's days for snowboarding. Though,
totally.
Like you would just, you would wait until it was like pow surfing.
Yeah. Because he was a surfer coming from Jersey.
Yeah.
Moving to where the best snow in North America,
Absolutely.
Like other than Canada. Like now it's like so funny. Like my wife is always like, all these Americans that like fly over British Columbia to get to Alaska, like they're freaking idiots. Like, like now I'm learning. You're right, honey. Like
you know, because she spent so much time in Bella Coola and Micah and all these places.
Oh my God, the Purcells.
Yeah. So like the whole Utah moniker of best snow on earth, like it's really nice when it's light there. It's also so far south, it gets really hot and it gets
almost
destroyed.
Yeah, it's almost probably too light sometimes.
Totally.
Like,
and probably in the 70s.
Oh yeah.
When it was colder, like I'm sure the 70s and 80s, like maybe it was the driest snow on earth.
When you actually see Dimitri riding in those early clips, you're like, that dude's got perfect conditions.
Oh yeah.
He's not like the equipment, like the boards are fine, but he's strapping himself with like, makeshift straps, like windsurfing stuff. Really.
Totally.
And you're like,
but in a way, like now that you're watching all these people pow surf, bindingless, you're like, well, they didn't really need any bindings because if they weren't crossing a track, like what did it matter?
Yeah, for what he's doing.
Yeah.
But his style is good too. That's another thing about Dimitri is his style is super good.
Oh yeah.
For making it up. He's not watching someone else.
No, but he's watching surfers and it's like if you like thinking of like, you know, like Dogtown or Riding Giants, like with what Peralta was telling us about the influence of surf culture and like doing the Bertelsmann turns and things like that. Like I see in these old photos, like those guys were definitely emulating surf heroes, even 100%. Though they lived in Utah. He probably brought that influence to all those skate rat kids in Salt Lake.
I think
that
you're right.
was the actual surf influence.
I think you're right for sure. I've been looking. There's an archive of old Playboy magazines online, like with the whole 60s and 70s.
Yeah.
And I'm looking through those years where they said he started in 72 and fairly quickly got notoriety in Playboy.
Yeah.
But I've never been able to find it.
I'm trying to think of,
and I've been going through looking through those old Playboys were like hundreds of pages of like crazy advertisements, and it is like fascinating.
It is. Well,
but
and
I haven't found the it's either an article or it's probably a checkout. There's like a checkout section
there's an archive, and so you know, this is 2 years later, but this is when he actually got the patent.
Yeah.
Like 1974.
It's gorgeous.
January 1. It's January or June? January 1, 1974, Dmitry Milovich, U.S. patent for the snowboard.
It's incredible.
You know, like there's this history of like, we have this binder of all these like
I want to
the
go
legal work,
so
like there's so much. Like the first time I sat down and like was looking at this, I'm like, this is snowboard history that like people don't know.
People don't know it. And I talk about it on the show all the time. The reason they don't know is that the snurfer was invented in Muskegon.
Yeah.
And Jake went.
Yeah.
And so there's like this easy history from 69, which is the snurfer.
Yeah.
So as long as you give it to Sherman. But it's
which
not
you have to in a way.
So then that like you can just tell that story, and you don't have to tell the Utah story.
Exactly.
And you know those guys in Utah you're talking about, they're furious.
Oh yeah, totally.
And rightfully so.
Yeah,
they were riding the lifts.
Yeah,
they were riding the lifts in '81.
Yeah.
Even with I think they were riding the lifts in '79.
They could have been. Yeah.
And I
think there was actually a time when they could ride Alta before it was decided.
That's it.
No.
79, 80, and 81, if I'm not mistaken.
Powder opened up to all those guys and was supportive of it. You know, and a lot of those guys were from Ogden, so they were down there.
Yeah. It's such a rad history, actually. I tried to tell it. I don't think that it's not going to hit the mainstream, but eventually it is the real story.
It is the real story, for sure.
That's the bottom line. Jake never denied it.
Oh, yeah.
Jake always said, Dimitri was doing it way before me.
Exactly. Yeah.
Jake didn't have a board you could ride at a resort in 79.
Not early. No, God, no.
79, not 80, not 81. Not till 85, really.
Yeah, I mean, the first Elite, when the first metal edges got on.
Yeah.
I mean, and that was the thing. It's like, it's funny for me because like that first interaction with my skateboarding buddy Chris and me buying his Woody. Him already knowing he needed metal edges in Maine. He's like, oh, Seth, you're going to love this thing. And it was
perfect.
Like his way to offload the Woody for $85. He's like, I got my use out of it. I'm getting $85 from this little
Probably
kid.
Bought it for $115.
Totally.
Yeah, that's great.
But the first, I distinctly remember I had a day, and it must have been midweek. We had a family friend that had a condo at Sugarloaf, and this was like post my parents' divorce. So my mom took me up. We stayed at my buddy's, like their friend's condo, and I had my first lift access powder day on that Burton Woody.
Yeah.
And it was like, that thing had taper. The swallowtail was small.
Yeah.
But the nose rocker and all this stuff, like there was this one trail at Sugarloaf, and I was the only person, and I just kept moving my tracks over the whole day. And I just remember being like, this is freaking unbelievable.
This is the perfect day.
Because I had the experiences of going on boilerplate and like being stuck on the low side of the trail, like because everything was cambered one way.
It's the worst.
And there was no way with no edge to like, I'm like, I can skateboard really well. And I'm like, this friggin' kind of sucks, you know? And especially compared to all the backhilling days.
Totally.
And then it was like that. I remember that day, like, and anytime I ride that trail to this day, I'm like thinking of those first turns and like the stacking of tracks and being like, that thing was actually really functional for powder.
Oh yeah.
You know,
well, the back hills. I mean, that's where, that's the back hills of New England is where
totally
that was honed in, right?
Yeah.
Like Jake went to Muskegon to go to the Sherman's World Championships,
the Snurfing Championships.
And they're like, your board has changed too much from what we have, but they were very inclusive, and they made a category for him. It's such an easy history to tell. Like it's complete in its thing, but you're leaving out. We've already said it, but you're leaving out like real legitimate people that had 10 years on Jake's scene.
No, and it's cool. Like I like internally, like we've just been like putting a bunch of effort because we're still a small manufacturer, you know? But it's rad, like getting to celebrate this year as like the first 50th anniversary.
That's so sick. That's big.
It's cool.
Yeah, that's super rad. Yeah, looking at Tom's board, one of the things that blew my mind, I was like, your sidewall is wood. How do you do that? He goes, you just don't put plastic there.
Right, totally. Well, and that is one of the, like, it's one of the ethos things that, you know, we're trying to, like, with the small batch manufacturing, like, doing as much as we can in wood. You know, not all of my boards have wood sidewalls. Like, we do it both. But like, as I started making boards for the first time, you're like, whoa, like the plastic waste from a single board sidewall. And it's like what you mill off, grind down, and it's plastic dust. It's just like, there isn't really a good excuse for this. And so like, you know, we started doing hard rock maple sidewalls, and actually the first couple years I had better results of like not blowing them when you have rock impact, because the wood is more porous, so it actually accepts more epoxy. You know, like I was like shocked, you know, like TB blew out one. He was like, well, I dropped a 30-foot cliff right onto a pointy rock. So like I would have blown out a plastic sidewall anyway. And that was like, I went like 2 years before I had rock damage that broke one with wooden sidewalls.
That's
incredible.
And it
was kind of like, this is pretty cool that like, not everyone wants it, but like some people do. So we put that in their boards, and then like your only off waste is sawdust. You know? And
that's
like,
so dope.
It's cool.
Yeah, I actually I get boards made by Rob Dow at Wired.
Cool.
And one of the projects I did last year was I got wood from Mount Seymour and I milled it up.
Nice.
And we made a core. And we made a board from Mount Seymour to ride on Mount Seymour. It was so sick.
What you start realizing too is like the fun thing with doing small batch manufacturing is like you can create a bunch of different feelings.
Very cool.
And the way the board feels on snow, the way it reacts, like it's so fun. And like
you test materials for to find that sweet spot for like what you actually love.
Yeah. And like one of the cool things that you know, like we put our own wood shop in, so we do all our own cores. We build them in house. And one of the things that I realized, you know, both through working with the big
manufacturers and also in starting to do it myself and like feeling the different feels. And this isn't to pick on Nitro because I think they're awesome.
Sure.
I think the stuff they do is rad. We had a board that we pulled apart. Like it was just a broken board that was in a shop at Sugarloaf. And it was like, okay, like let's look at their core.
Yeah.
And there was like 37 finger joints in the wood core.
I hate the finger joints.
I do too.
I gotta say.
And I really do believe, and this isn't like just hippie bullshit or something, but it's like, if the only living part of the board, like you think about the transfer of energy and all that stuff.
Sure.
So you're using a wood core, the way that energy resonates, the way that things flex evenly, all that stuff, having a single grain from tip to tail in your core makes a huge difference.
It's the only way to do it.
It is the only way to do it.
Yeah.
And I get that like big manufacturers, especially if stuff's coming out of China, wherever, if it's being manufactured somewhere where the people manufacturing it don't ride snowboards,
right.
I get that they're utilizing material to create less waste.
Yep.
But it affects the end product.
And also that's the problem with just a capitalist society is that the driving the price down becomes like this important thing.
Yeah.
And you go, I don't know. Yeah, like I couldn't afford a $10,000 board, obviously.
Yeah.
But we're not talking about a $10,000 board.
No, exactly.
We're talking about,
$1,000 board.
$1,000 board.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, the nice thing about the show is that we've got this connected community of people that have been snowboarding for a long time. I mean, the kids listen to it too a little bit, but it's more of the like nostalgia thing.
Yeah.
And one of the best things about nostalgia is that it does paint this kind of rosy picture. Like you kind of forget how crappy this stuff was back in.
Oh yeah.
Like that Brushie trout, sick board.
Oh yeah.
Probably
I wouldn't want to ride it now.
Yeah, no.
And
actually,
it didn't fit my feet either.
That
It's too narrow.
6-1, I rode the 6. I had the 55 of the year after that, and I rode it, and I was the one that Terrier was on before he had swordboard. Yeah, with the
Air 5-1, the red
Air 5-1. That's exactly what I had, and I rode it, and I was like, wow, the geometry on this is super wacky.
Yeah,
like it's not for anyone.
Right.
It's too narrow.
Yeah. Well,
it's like a kid board, but
Jake,
it's too long.
Terrier, those guys all have a size 9
size 8 or size 9. Yeah.
So that was a problem that I ran into at Burton, and that's actually a big part of what I wanted to do. And when I started making custom boards, I had a light bulb moment that kind of coincided. It was like spring of 2011. I never played golf as a kid. I didn't, I didn't understand how someone could be out there for 5 hours, like as a skateboarder or snowboarder. I'm like, I know. I came to it later, and it was actually because of Nike. The team manager, after we'd gotten to know each other for a while, he's like, dude, you have a mind that like, I think you'd actually like this sport.
Oh, cool.
And it was when they were huge into the hard goods side of it. It was before they stopped that.
Yeah.
So every year he just put an additional product budget in, and I like started it and didn't have lessons, but just kind of started figuring it out. And was like, this is actually pretty fun. And then I like went down this rabbit hole of getting addicted to that as well.
Oh no.
And so anyway, like there was a guy who worked for this coincided at the time when my Nike deal ended. I had a friend that had been doing marketing for Visa, left Visa to take over partnership marketing for Callaway. So he invited me down to Carlsbad and was like, dude, I know you love this. Come down. We'll do a custom fitting for you, like the same place where Phil Mickelson gets his stuff set up.
Wow.
So I like go down to the fitting center in Carlsbad and I like go through this whole thing. And I'm like, oh, it's like, well, all of your biometrics of your body, you're like arm length versus, like I'm like longer torso, shorter legs.
Right.
All this stuff affects the outcome of how you
100%
do this thing.
Yeah.
And that would like also coincided with the time of like starting to make these boards with Greg. And it was like, oh, well, no one in snowboarding makes your board based on your foot size, but that should be your starting point.
Yeah.
And so this is what we've done with Winterstick, where it's like when someone gets a custom board, it's what's your foot size and how much do you weigh? And based on how much do you weigh, what type of flex do you like on your snowboard? Because we can alter your core so that it fits you.
So sick.
And so I went from like all these years on Burton squeezing, like when the balance was the only good pipe board.
Yeah.
I would ride like 2 to 2.5 boot sizes too small so that I wasn't toe dragging on my way to my toe side turn in the half pipe, because there was no way to compete at that level.
Couldn't
if you were dragging
JG
your toes
to make you one that
later,
the geometry was better?
So later, this board, the project name was the Bucket, and then it became the Rush. And we created a balance for people with big feet.
How insane was it to work with JG?
Awesome. Awesome.
Because he was the head of the engineers at Burton.
Totally.
While you were there.
Yeah. And Doyle for bindings. Yeah. Those two guys had such an impact on my knowledge of technical stuff with snowboarding, and how, because it was the trickle down of those guys working with Terry and Craig, and like, how do you adapt things to help you get better? Yeah. And they had a huge impact on me.
That's so sweet.
So then all of a sudden I'm like, now I have a snowboard factory. We can custom make anything to anyone's foot size. And then you start like people having these breakthroughs, and I'm like, oh, I can actually just make my waist width of my pro model like exactly to how I want it. Yeah. And then like I've had all these like turning breakthroughs, which sounds funny in just the last few years, but where like now I'm like, oh, like you go, like I'll just go be testing something like up on Blackcomb, and you're like, I can like ass drag every heel side turn without losing any edge contact. No chatter.
I worked on that last year, and I can't.
It becomes this whole new.
I want to do that
experience where, like, for me, it feels like what I developed into like a bottom turn in surfing was, where I'm like, I can lay this over, and there is no resistance, because it's like it's just water in a different element, but now with the right shape, taper, width. And I really think it's like my last 2 years at Baker of like, winning Baker more in my 40s than I did in my 20s and 30s.
That's fucking awesome.
I'm like all stoked on like, I was, so bummed when it was canceled last year, but I'm like, I got a chance to three-peat next winter, which no one's ever done.
Nobody's ever done it, dude.
People have won it more times than that, but no one's ever gone, there's a bunch of like back-to-back. Yep. Palmer did it. I believe Craig did it. Terrier did it. Yep. No one's ever done 3 in a row. So like that's like my whole year focus goal.
It's an impossible competition. It is so.
It is
like just hair. Like
totally.
There's got to be ties in there. It's that close.
Oh yeah. Like the year I got second to Debari, it was like they had to go down to the 1,000th of a second.
1,000th.
Like.
That's insane.
I think it was.
It's the same time.
He won by 4 thousandths.
Yeah, that's the same time. Yeah. You guys went the same speed.
Yeah,
4 thousandths of a second. That's insane.
And there's been years where it was like I had a super tight one with Terrier one year too. It was like the second time I got second to him. It was like I actually had the fastest time of the week, but it was on Saturday. And it's like,
how does that burn you up? Like, I am not. See, I am.
Well, and I think that's why my mom still is like, "Oh, you beat Terry again. Good job, honey."
Because you have to wait a year to go back and try again.
And they're like, so I like this last 7-year stretch there has been rad. I haven't been out of the top 5. I've won it 3 times.
Yeah.
Had a 3rd, and then 2 4ths, which are the worst. And a 5th, like I'd rather have the 5th than the 4th. You're like, I just
people talk
blew
about
that
second.
turn.
People talk about second being the worst.
It's the worst, but it's like you're still got duct tape. Like, you're adding to your duct tape collection. So that's not a bad thing.
Right, because 3rd, you're like,
well, 3rd, you got duct tape. You're stoked to be on the podium in 3rd.
Right, whereas 2nd, you're like, fuck.
I know. And that was the thing. The sporadic years of going back, like I'd gotten second 3 times.
Yeah.
And it was like the 4,000th one. I think it was like 100th to Terrier one year. I'm just like, fuck, am I just never going to break through here? And then like in 13, when I finally won it, was rad. And then like last time it was like, I think I won run one on Sunday. Second place was like Harry's brother, Hagen.
Yeah.
But he was 2.5 seconds behind me. Like I threw down a massive margin on pro men.
That was insane.
It was big.
That was nuts.
And then the second run was actually going better.
Yeah.
And I made a mistake. Like,
oh, did you?
15 turns in or something, and then it was slower than my first run.
Like
my first
way at
run,
the bottom. Yeah.
My first run held up by like still a big margin. I think it was still well over a second.
Oh yeah.
So it was like kind of cool to be like,
that first run was the fastest time of everybody.
Well, and it was funny too because the weather sucked.
Yes.
I missed my run. I was sitting down in the middle lodge there.
Yep.
And I come out and Blair's coming in having it, and he's like, dude, like, I just went.
Yeah.
I'm like,
get up there.
Oh shit. Like,
yeah, you're not close to
no. Cause it's like, it's cut down to only like the 40 guys for finals day.
Right,
I'm like,
right. And you're not close to the top where you are.
No, it's a slow speed lift. You're like,
slow.
I get up there and, like Gwen's like, dude, just get in the freaking gate. Like, we've been waiting for you. So I'm like all panicked. No, like, no prep.
Not the way that you want to be
not
going
the way
into
that you
the
want to
gate.
go into
Not
the
even
start
close.
shack at Baker. But I go in and like throw down that run. And I think it was just all like being in the moment and like being like, okay, well, whatever. I just got to find the flow right here, and found it. And
I remember going to Baker after, like the day after the event was run, to go and see if I could do it. And I'd be like, I can't. Maybe I'm ADD
so
or
beat
something.
up on Monday.
Yeah. But it's like holding on, going that fast, right? And it being beat up.
Yeah, because we did a Lauren Miller story on it a few years back.
Did you?
And then Kinger and I, and then we
cool.
Like supposedly we were like, oh, the race is done. Let's go to Wiggly's, and like, and it was like months
perfect.
later when we went to Wiggly's, but
That's
making
amazing,
movies
though.
but we stayed after. They kept it closed for us on Monday to film a bunch of like Tom Day was filming, and like so he's like right in there, 6 inches off your nose while you're coming through the
slow mo, just like the board, just like
So we did
That's
that,
I gotta
but it
go
was
and watch
so gnarly that day riding it because it had like gotten cold that night. All the chatter marks had set up, and it's just like, well, we got to get these shots. You're like trying to haul ass into something. You're like, this is so much sketchier than it was yesterday.
Well, Maëlle blew everybody's minds in the that Olympic year because she won back to back. She won Baker and she won Boardercross, and she said, the Baker thing means more to me. And I heard you say that today too. And I don't think like it resonates with a snowboarder. I understand. That's that same connection all the way back with Winterstick to like Tom and Duncan setting that course.
Well, and like the award boards for me, it's so cool because the first time I finally got on there was like the last one before they went to the next board. So it's Tom and I'm the last name.
Oh, that's
and
so
it's
sick.
like,
that's so sick, dude.
It's like, it's cool.
That's the real deal, man.
Yeah.
Well, let's cut it. We're at 2 hours and 40 minutes in. We got to do this again. This was super fun, and we haven't even touched on the fact that you moved to Canada. And got married and kids and the whole whole nine. But it's just been so fun chewing the fat with you, man. This is amazing.
Talking snowboarding.
It's what you got to do.
My wife, this is maybe like, I guess it would be 4 years ago, like the 4 years ago Baker trip. We decided we were going to do the RV in the parking lot that year for Baker. And
so fun.
Kinger is coming with us, like
rad.
Kinger the sidekick.
Yep.
So she was just like, at the end of the week, she's like, well, I am never doing that again. She's like, you guys, like, there's nothing else you could talk about other than snowboarding for 5 straight days, like with the 3 of us all staying together in an RV. I'm like, and she was pregnant at the time. So
wow.
She couldn't even.
She's a trooper.
Yeah. I was like, you're right, honey. I'm really sorry about that.
It was so mind blowing for me to be in Pat A's RV, seeing Mikey B's stuff. Like, These are my guys. These are my celebrities.
Yeah, totally.
I'm walking around that place just going like, holy shit. Oh my God.
Oh, I'm always like, dude, Jeff Fulton just said hi to me. He knows my name. You know, he taught Craig Kelly how to snowboard.
That's amazing.
Like, talking with Dano every year. I mean, it's just all that.
Yeah.
To me, that's the best week of snowboarding of the year every year because
it's the culture.
It's our culture.
Yeah.
It's
a culture.
Everyone from everywhere. There's
seeing Wes make peace.
Totally. It's always fun early week.
Oh, yeah.
Because usually it's like him and Jamie. Like, I'll be going up a chair and it's like, hey, there's Wes, there's Jamie. Like,
that's so sick.
And you're just like, yeah, it's so rad.
Yeah, and Terrier and Keith Wallace was there last year.
I know.
Like, how cool was that?
Yeah.
Keith in his Burton jacket. You're like,
that
that's
was
fucking so dope.
Yeah, badass.
Yeah, that's the best. I'm going to do an Idaho trip. It sounds like this year.
Cool.
I'm excited to go down there.
Yeah.
I didn't realize, there's some Idaho legends. There's a bunch of people came out of
Steve
Idaho.
Matthews.
Yep.
Yeah. Totally.
Man. Psyched.
Yeah.
All right. I'll let you go, man. It's
cool.
getting late. Thanks for having me up to your house. This was insane.
Thank you.
And
we should do the next one as like après riding this winter.
I'm 100% in.
Yeah.
100%.
Or après sledding.
Après sledding. I don't know. Usually I'm just like gripped on the way home going like, oh my God, not again. It's dark.
Yeah.
You leave
totally.
in the morning
it's
and it's dark.
Yeah.
And you say, I'm going to do a half day today. I'll tell my guys that every time. I might have said that every time this year.
Yeah.
But I'm gonna leave at noon or something.
Yeah.
That's
actually the fun thing about where we are right here. Cause it's like, we're still in that early stages. Like daughter's got daycare. We can get her in there at 8:30.
Yeah.
It's a 5:25. That is the drop dead pickup time.
That's the absolute.
It is the absolute.
They're calling child services.
But I can do that, race up here.
Yep.
Sleds are on the trailer already. Hook them up. In 25 minutes, I'm at the parking lot at the Hurley.
So
go do 2 touring laps and like be back and like do it all. And it's like
the right thing.
We like couldn't have been happier about landing where I landed in life and like being here and like raising a family and like starting a whole new chapter and like having this kind of access.
You're doing it, man.
Unreal.
This is the dream.
Yeah.
This is where, and it doesn't always end up like this, right? Like talking with Farmer down in California, he's still killing it. He's still, doing his thing.
Yeah.
Or Parada coming down, moving back down from Alaska. Actually, I think he stayed in Alaska, but he's a golf pro, part of the year.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And like,
meeting him was cool. Like I did, I went and did tailgate one year because I'd normally been over in Cordova and, it's like just, all of those, like every time you meet someone and there's like that like-minded meeting of like what it was like in those early days.
Hell yeah.
And like, that just shared experience. It's really special about our sports.
Yeah. I think those guys like did such a service for people like us that like,
totally.
Like I think of you seeing Palmer and being that, and him making a face,
doing his weird, and then like now that I know him and all that, he'd just be clowning people all through Europe when we'd be over there the same way, and I'm like, nothing's changed. You know?
Those guys were the fucking best.
Totally.
Like that was what got us into snowboarding. It wasn't like a Sean White, like perfect half pipe, Red Bull pullback. It's in the middle of a private mountain somewhere shot. That,
exactly.
I don't think I could have fallen in love with that because I'm not going to get that. That's not going to happen for me.
I know.
But Palmer in a Cadillac.
One of the other big, crystallizing moments for me, and I forget what Christmas this was, but it was the one that it came out. My mom got me Snowboarders in Exile.
Oh, the best.
And like
the absolute best.
To get that I think for me was the first time I was like, oh, I want to travel the world.
Yeah.
Like those guys are traveling the world.
Yep.
Just experiencing different cultures, different places. And like that whole start of Fall line right then was such a cool documentation of like, because you'd seen it in ski movies.
Totally.
But you'd never like followed a cast of characters from the snowboard industry which gave you this sense of like who they were as people and like the characters they were.
Brian
and, like,
Harper talking about Burt Lamar's car.
Yeah.
And
Totally.
And being in, they're over in Europe and they're
Yeah.
stealing his car.
Yeah.
Like they're still doing the things that you identify with as a scrub skateboard kid.
Exactly.
Like, oh my God, these guys, I got to do some of this.
Yeah.
Yeah. And meeting those guys or interviewing those guys for me is, Damien was my guy.
Yeah.
Steve Graham.
Yeah.
Like my guy.
Totally.
Like that cliff in Exile.
Oh, yeah.
Is still legit by today.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, Dimitri did not do a cliff that.
No. No, and that's the thing. Like those guys, that generation and the way they're pushing it, and that they were just kind of freewheeling it and like, hey, we're going to drive through the desert to Jackson and just see what's happening there today. And
yeah, totally.
And just dropping stuff that, like you knew they didn't pre-ride that stuff. And like,
oh no. And it's all resort riding.
Yeah.
That's the craziest part of Exile is that even the double flip section is under the chairlift.
Yeah.
You're like, could you imagine just being there at that time? And these guys are throwing doubles.
Oh yeah.
Like, no. That is impossible.
It's so sick.
Yeah, that was a movie that was because I'd seen the Western Front, which was
See, I didn't get to see Western Front. So like for me, that was just like, whoa. Well, there was an old, and I can't remember which generation of, I'd seen One Track Mind from Burton.
Okay.
There was I
hadn't seen that.
There was a Sims thing that like Brad Stewart was
Shredders
narrating one of those. Like Palmer was on the cover doing a method.
Yeah. I have seen that.
I mean,
Snow
I'd
Days
seen
or
those.
something. Yeah.
But
team movies, that was the thing. It wasn't. This wasn't a team movie. This was just what was happening in skateboarding, right? Like it was like it went from like the Powell movies to like the H Street movies,
exactly.
And this was like
because those were the movies that I lived my childhood was through the Bones Brigade, and then the transitioning into the H Street stuff, and then it was like, oh man, this is a thing. Like,
with snowboarding, one of the things that's bizarre to me is that I always thought in snowboarding, okay, skateboarding happened before,
right?
And then snowboarding stole from skateboarding, but really they were happening at the same time.
Yeah.
Like Burt Lamar copied Tony Hawk's actual board shape, and that became that trick stick.
Yeah, totally.
Like they existed at the same time.
Yeah.
Like skateboarding became twin tips at the same time that snowboarding became twin tips.
Exactly.
It wasn't, there's not a different timeline there.
Yeah.
The Dogtown Z-Boys guys, that's Terry Kidwell and Keith Kimmel at the quarter pipe. It's happening the same years, right?
Yeah.
I think. Yeah, maybe
it's close.
84 versus 79.
But those guys, like Terry and those guys would have, skated ramps.
Oh, totally.
With a crossover because of that California connection.
Cardial, like
yeah.
That whole.
Because I remember footage of Kidwell, doing the inverts, doing those backside 540s at the quarter pipe.
Totally. He was doing those tripod like nose wheelie things. I remember that movie.
Yeah.
And I remember.
And Craig was on a Sims.
And Craig was on a Sims too. And he wasn't really a standout of that movie.
No, not necessarily.
He wasn't really a big standout on the Sims team. Yeah. It wasn't until Burton that it was like, holy shit.
The blacktop year. It was like, oh.
Yeah. I'm trying to get his yellow pants. Actually, Ross has.
Sick.
So Ross bought them at a garage sale from Kelly Joe.
No way.
Which is sick. Way back in the day.
Yeah. And I had the Burton yellow pants, by the way.
Did you?
Yeah.
You were on the team when that was happening?
These were actually, it predated that, but like,
wow.
The first snowboard outerwear my family bought me.
Yeah.
And it was like the interchangeable knee pads that went in on the inside. So it had that.
With the zips, did you have full zips down the side or no zips? Because there was the freestyle pant and the other one, whatever.
Yeah, I don't think it was full zip.
Yeah, you would know because the zippers ended up breaking actually.
But I was like, Mom, Dad, like, I have to have the yellow Burton pants. And like, I didn't get a jacket. There wasn't budget for that. There was no like, it was like, I had a
one piece
purple non-insulated, non-waterproof LL Bean anorak.
Nice.
That kind of like the color kind of worked with like what Brushie had going on with his yellow pants and his Burton jacket. But it was like I had enough budget for like a pair of pants. There you go.
That's amazing.
And I was like, yeah, I want the pants.
Yeah. Yeah, those pants were sick. Yeah, so I'm trying to get Ross has agreed to lend them to me.
Yeah.
And we can do a Brotherhood of the Traveling Pants and actually ride in Craig's pants. You know, like, whatever. Take a lap in Craig's pants.
Totally.
I told JG I wanted him to be the first.
Yeah.
And he's like, I don't want to ride. That sounds gross, actually. What are you talking about? I don't really get what you're talking about.
Yeah.
Why would you do that?
Yeah.
I'm like, oh, okay. I'll ask other people, I guess. Yeah. Maybe he'll be into it after he figures it out.
Exactly.
I don't know. Those yellow pants are, they represent everything that snowboarding was at that.
Totally.
That was after Exile.
Yeah.
But it was still like, that was the next one for me. It was like Bored with the World or whatever. But Exile was it was actually the transition from skateboarding being the most important to like snowboarding.
Totally.
Like you're like, oh my God, I got to do that.
Yeah.
Because I can't do what skateboarding
I think,
is doing right now.
I think that was that tipping point where it's like the first couple years, like all of a sudden it was like, oh, like, well, now I have a board with edges and a tail.
Right.
You know, I rode that barfoot for 1 year, got a Sims half pipe.
Rad.
It was an old used one that was white. Yep. I took a black Sharpie and colored the whole thing other than the logos black. So it looked like the more current one. Yes. And then
that's amazing.
And then got that purple Craig Kelly, his second board.
Did that white board have wood sidewalls? I think it might have. Or did it have plastic?
No, it had plastic.
It had plastic.
But I distinctly remember the first run on that board.
Yep.
Because the barfoot never flexed.
Yeah.
And I remember riding the same trail, going up, getting off the chairlift for my first run. It was like, oh, like this is like bending into the turns. And like
carve.
I could carve the barfoot, but very different.
It only did that one.
It did the one radius.
Yeah, the one radius.
And this was like, oh, I can like manipulate this.
Oh, so much more fun.
Yeah.
I ride softboards to this day because of that. It's so much more fun. Yeah. I love it. All right.
That's rad.
We're wrapping it up at 3 hours. Thanks a lot, buddy.
Thank you. That was fun.
Right. That was awesome. FNRad shoutouts this week to Seth Wescott and his family. Thanks for doing the show, Seth. And check out the Heartland Inn in New Meadows, Idaho, if you're looking for a secret powder destination this winter. The Heartland Inn Hotel and Bed and Breakfast offers access to over 700 miles of groomed snowmobile trails with what looks like insane backcountry snowboarding lines. Rory sent me some photos of a pillow line he took the niche snowboard crew to last season. It really does look insane. Check out heartlandinn.com. I'll put a link in the Instagram post for the show, and maybe I'll bump into you there. Looks like the perfect place for me to bring my sled. Special thanks to all you hardcore listeners who make it all the way to the end. Be sure to come back next week for another episode of the FNRad Snowboard Podcast presented by Vans and brought to you by SIA Productions.